In the year 21XX, Earth was no longer what it used to be. It had become a chaotic wasteland. Ripping through black clouds, an ominous ship skimmed the ruined atmosphere. Focusing on the radar, our protagonist spoke over the radio, reporting that he'd finally found the target. Moments later, the ship plunged straight down to the marked location on the map. Below, the scene was bleak, revealing the ruins of a city that had once brimmed with life. In desperation, a survivor ran through the rubble, begging for help. Sobbing, the boy screamed at the top of his lungs, asking if anyone was there. Suddenly, a hulking giant monster hurtled down, shattering the ground right in front of him. Terrified, the boy stepped back as the hideous creature prepared to pounce. Worse still, another monster suddenly appeared behind the young man, making him gulp and cry out for help. With no escape left, the poor lad screamed for anyone who might hear. Clutching a family photo, all he wanted was the tiniest chance to survive. Surrounded by monsters that had ravaged the world, the outcome seemed inevitable. Closing his eyes, the survivor prayed to the heavens for someone to punish these beasts. Just then, a frantic beam of light tore through the sky, crushing the creature the moment it hit the ground. Lying on the ground, the boy heard a calm voice apologize for being late. Emerging from the smoke, our hero appeared majestic, and the survivor asked who he was. Jin, with jade-green eyes, remained silent for a long moment. This made the youth tremble suddenly, a smile breaking through his choking sobs. "All right, finally after all. We can take back our world now, can't we?" His voice echoed through the silent space, faint as a breeze over water. Jin replied coolly, "Yes, that's right. So rest easy and be at peace." The young man forced a smile with a dazed look and said, "Thank you very much." "Thank you," and with that, he passed away right in front of Jin. A faint sound rang out shortly after. At this, Jin's expression suddenly darkened, his brows knitting in helplessness. Just then, a voice suddenly spoke from somewhere. "Jin, you're too slow." Seeing the person before him, Jin turned his head coldly and then called out to Kagura. Kagura adjusted his glasses slightly and replied, "Maybe he's the last survivor of this land. Give it up. Jin, you need to face this harsh reality." At Kagura's words, Jin only lowered his head sullenly without answering. Emboldened, Kagura asserted confidently that the human species had truly been wiped out. They were born from prolonged environmental pollution, disgusting mutated monsters, and a whole lot of corruption. They possessed body regeneration abilities beyond belief. Even nuclear weapons couldn't wipe them out. However, we never intended to give up. Instead, we kept running experiments on potential humans, and in the end, we finally found a tool to strike back. But now there's no one left for us to save anymore. Right, Kagura lamented helplessly. He watched the last person on Earth vanish, a voice ringing out, "We really have arrived too late." Jin forced a rebuttal. "There's still something worth protecting." At this, Kagura was incredulous. "Do you really believe there's still a survivor out there?" Jin brushed past him like a gust of wind and replied gently, "Not exact." Smiling, Jin asserted firmly, "Rather, it's in the future. The nanomachines you've painstakingly built, they can heal the environment too, right?" Kagura answered, "That's right." Hearing that, Jin went on to analyze. That army of nanos doesn't just eliminate the regeneration ability of the corrupted ones. They also trigger a revival process for this planet. And then one day, this planet will reclaim its former beauty. And at that moment, a new civilization will surely spring up again, just as humanity once did. After hearing Jin speak for a while, Kagura couldn't help but scoff. "Sounds like a far-fetched fairy tale." Jin calmly explained, "That's enough for me. Maybe just that tiny spark of hope is more than enough." In Jin's thoughts, the power I'm holding might become necessary in the future. Believing in that little maybe could, who knows, be the key to saving the whole future. After watching Jin lying in the experimental enclosure for a while, Kagura turned to leave with the faint optimism remaining. "If only we can hand that chance back to future generations, that's enough." Just then, a voice echoed from somewhere. "The hibernation system has been activated." 0 While monsters ravaged the Earth, the system's sound kept growing louder. 5, 20, 153, 376, 974, 1384, 5180, 8492, 17,987. According to the system's numbers, Earth was gradually restoring itself. Meanwhile, the monsters were growing weaker. The numbers kept climbing. 32,416, 56,428, 84,524. As the sun rose higher and life began to sprout, and birds flew across the wide sky, it marked the moment the monsters started to fade. 184,236, 246,578, 306,938, 562,487, 847,527. With numbers increasing, Earth gradually grew lush again. Cute rabbits, calm horses grazing, a scene Earth hadn't seen in ages. Meanwhile, the numbers continued to rise. 384,235, 525,469, 7,550,192, 14,250,785, 25,402,437, 45,756,249, 8,952,425. When Earth again faced the sun with clear blue beaches and white sands, that was the story of 100 million years later. The system announcement rang out. Access code confirmed, initiating hibernation release procedure. The sound of hurried footsteps, beads of sweat now dotted Hakuma's face. The girl's entire family was fleeing under attack from a red-eyed monster. In this life-or-death situation, Dampo ran behind, sobbing and helplessly shouting. Is he really in a place like this? Hakuma affirmed decisively. He certainly is. Shandy interjected helplessly, but if he's not here, we're as good as dead. At that, Hakuma spoke up. He really is here. As soon as she finished, the girl clutched her necklace tightly. A second later, Hakuma's eyes widened and with solemnity said, "The guardian god is surely present in this place." With that, Hakuma and the others ran straight toward the old sanctuary door ahead. They panicked and shoved the door open and rushed inside. Upon seeing there's no way out, Dampo despairingly announced, "Hey look, it's a dead end up ahead." At that, even Hakuma's face went pale, stunned and speechless with panic. Meanwhile, the massive ferocious monster was closing in. This only made Shandy more terrified. What do we do now? While her two friends crouched down awaiting their fate, Hakuma still had a thin thread of hope and pleaded, "Please save us." She shouted, tears welling up. "Please save us, O guardian god." No sooner had Hakuma finished than the experiment chamber shattered, and in an instant a voice boomed. Request received, accompanied by a massive surge of energy fired straight at the monster. To Hakuma's astonishment, one strike and the beast was pulverized. Hakuma and the others were startled by what had happened, while a strange voice kept echoing from afar. "See, that faith was worth it, wasn't it?" A figure gradually emerged from the lab chamber. It was none other than Jin. He had been in hibernation for 100 million years, waiting for his return. With a smile, Jin declared briskly, "Believe in the infinite possibilities of the future." Opening the storage box, Jin said, "The storage cube Kagura made is truly impressive. My outfit is preserved exactly as it was." Looking at the computer screen, his disbelief was obvious. But is this really the world of 100 million years later? Most of the stored data had been severely damaged. It's surprising this shelter held up until now. Maybe it's all thanks to the presence of nanoparticles in the air. The syringe on the table is the nano-injection device. Holding the small box, Jin pondered aloud that he'd like to learn what happened to the planet, but Kagura left him only this cubic message. Before we go on. Thinking that, Jin, still bare-chested, turned to the Hakuma group. "Could you tell me about the current situation? Oh my, how rude of me. It seems I've been naked for 100 million years, hasn't it?" The more he talked, the more the Hakuma people gaped in disbelief. One of them gently slipped gloves back on and added, "Well, that's better. You should have a presentable appearance, right?" No sooner said than Jin donned the exact clothes from 100 million years ago. After countless centuries sealed, the secret chamber door was finally greeted by sunlight. Jin's group slowly stepped out, and upon seeing the scene before them, Jin's face turned to stunned amazement. Seeing the lush landscape with rolling mountains and a meandering canal, Jin could hardly believe his eyes. So this is the world after those long 100 million years. There's not a trace left of the era I knew. Seeing him still dazed, Hakuma beside him immediately tugged his sleeve and called, "O guardian god, please follow this way, stay close to us." With that, the girl pointed toward the group led by Dampo up ahead. Seeing that, Jin focused his attention right away. He couldn't help but be skeptical of the people before him. Humans? No way. Humanity should have gone extinct in the previous era, right? Could they have evolved into human-like forms over that vast span of time? The more he thought, the more he tried to guess the forms of Dampo and Shandy in front of him. Koala and cat, perhaps. While Hakuma stared at Jin with a puzzled face, he remained lost in thought. Very likely they'd been affected by nanoparticles. The fact they still spoke the same language from 100 million years ago was the clearest proof. Finished thinking, Jin smiled and introduced himself. I haven't introduced myself yet. My name is Jin Shido, just call me Jin." "All right," Hakuma replied on hearing that. "I'm Hakuma Phil, you can call me Hakuma." Nearby, Dampo and Shandy didn't interrupt. "I'm Dampo, I'm Shandy," they said. After hearing everything, Jin couldn't help but ask, "So then, what do you want me to do?" Pulling him along, Hakuma explained, "We're almost there. I hope you can destroy the invaders out there. This made Jin full of questions. Invaders. As the two of them chatted, Shandy's face suddenly went ashen. The boy trembled in panic and shouted. When they saw the village engulfed in smoke and flames, Shandy and Dampo were stunned. Our village. No sooner had he said that than Shandy couldn't contain his emotions and ran forward calling, Dad, Mom. Hakama behind hurriedly stopped him. Wait, don't run so fast. In the current situation, Jin just stood quietly observing everything. It all seemed to be speculation in his mind. Wooden barricades and the rows of houses were built of wood. It seemed the level of civilization hadn't advanced much. With that thought, Jin followed Hakama's group deeper into the burning village. At the sight before them, Hakama's face turned pale. In an instant she cried out, Grandma. Her grandmother, who was also the village chief, was facing off directly against a huge monster. Seeing Hakama, she anxiously admonished, Is that you, Hakama? Why did you come back here at a time like this? Looking at the monster before him, Jin coldly thought to himself, Is that the invader everyone mentioned? It looked no different from a corrupted beast. Do people in this era really call them invaders? The village chief helplessly urged, Get out of this area immediately. Hakama of course paid no heed. She unleashed her power and declared plainly, I'm not going anywhere. I'll stay to help you. Seeing the flow of energy in her, Jin was a bit startled and thought silently, This reaction means, It's time I put it to the test. With that thought, he quickly charged forward, and with a single strike, Jin easily knocked the monster away. While carrying the village chief, Jin politely offered, Allow me to intervene a bit. In an instant, Hakama seized the opportunity to rush forward. Seeing her using her power to attack the monster, Jin praised her enthusiastically. Nice, go for it. Hakama tried to concentrate power in her palm, then struck straight at the monster. The power detonated quickly, forcing it to reel back in pain a few steps. Only when the monster's corpse lay on the ground could he be certain. It was indeed the regenerative suppression mechanism of the microparticles. The corrupted creature's cells showed no sign of recovery. Did that girl actually control the nanoparticles in the atmosphere? Usually only people with compatible constitutions can do that. But, as he thought this, he wondered, could anyone in this era make that fireball? At his question, the village chief looked a bit puzzled. This era. Even so, she answered Jin, no, only a few people have that ability. They are those who possess divine power. Including me, there are only 4 people like that in this village. This surprised Jin. Divine power. Seconds later, he sank into thought. So that's what they call the nanomanipulation energy. At that moment, Hakama suddenly ran to the village chief, asking with a worried look, Grandma, where is everyone in the village? The chief replied gently, I've evacuated them all. But more importantly, why did you children come back here? As she said this, she frowned in despair. This village is basically finished. The monster from earlier was actually just a newly hatched juvenile. We are completely powerless against the truly mature one. Before long, a swarm of young monsters will pour in and wipe out the entire village. No sooner had her lament ended than another voice rang out. Grandma, could you be a little less cowardly? On seeing who spoke, the village chief cried, Sarlis. Meanwhile, Sarlis calmly said, Those invaders are at that level only. I'll rip them all apart. The chief worriedly asked, Where did you take the villagers? Sarlis answered, I personally led them all to the shelter. Hakama walked over slowly and called softly, Father. Seeing his daughter, Hakama's father smiled in puzzlement. Hakama, I was frantic when I couldn't find you in the shelter. Where on earth did you go? Hakama answered plainly, I went to the sealed door. At her reply, the village chief was of course horrified. Hakama, you're brave. How could you dare enter that forbidden place? Hakama, flustered and frightened, replied, Grandma once told me that our village's guardian deity sleeps behind that door, and if the village falls into danger, he will surely appear to save us. Hearing this, the chief immediately followed Hakama's gaze and looked at Jin with curiosity. Is it this person? He doesn't look like any sort of god at all. Cutting off her thought, Sarlis suddenly scoffed derisively. Ha, give me a break. That lowly species as guardian god, don't make me laugh. Hearing this, Jin frowned and retorted unpleasantly, lowly species. Shandy tried to step forward and explain, Sir, really this person is our guardian god. The more he heard, the more puzzled Sarlis became. What? You were wondering where she went. Turns out she went with Hakama. As soon as he finished, Sarlis strode up to Jin and sneered contemptuously. Look at his ears. He's just a lowlife, with no beastkin traits at all. He must have just been wandering there by chance, and you all misjudged him. Seeing Sarlis analyzed this way, Shandy hurriedly objected. No, we weren't mistaken. He personally defeated an invader. Sarlis laughed excitedly and replied, You mean that little hatchling earlier? That thing, I could have finished it with one blow. As he said this, he didn't bother to hide it and pointed the tip of his blade straight at Jin, coldly threatening, Listen up. This is an internal matter of our village. We don't need a lowly outsider poking in. That's what I mean, don't go meddling foolishly. No sooner had he finished speaking than Sarlis swept past Jin like a gust of wind. Seeing him leave, Hakuma's father couldn't help but ask, "Wait, Sarlis, where are you going?" Sarlis answered, "Isn't it obvious? I'm going to root out that gigantic monster, and you lot can stay here trembling," Sarlis said with a tone and expression full of contempt, which left the village chief utterly helpless. She immediately warned, "You fool, you could save your life if you run away right now." In the current situation, Jin simply stood silently watching the spectacle. The village chief approached him solemnly and said, "All right, I don't know who you are, but thank you for helping the children. If you don't mind, please escort these kids to the shelter with my son, will you? I must chase after Sarlis and finish this final gamble." At this, Hakuma called out anxiously, "Grandma." Jin didn't bother with the request and coldly refused, making the village chief falter. "I refuse. I have my own pride. I can't just stand by and let him call me a lowlife forever. Let him go and offer his neck then." With a resolute tone, Jin departed crisply, leaving everyone stunned. As dusk fell, the alpha monster appeared outside, massive and armored in hard scale. It moved forward slowly, step by step. At that moment, a figure suddenly appeared, accompanied by a shouted voice, "Hey, you beast." With a spear in hand, Sarlis unleashed his power and declared firmly, "I am the one who will shoulder the fate of this nation, a warrior destined to become a holy knight. You're just an invader creature at this level, aren't you? I'll show you I can fell you without anyone's help." With that, Sarlis, wielding lightning-like power, directly charged the alpha. This, of course, drew the attention of the juvenile. In an instant, they all steeled themselves and rushed straight at Sarlis. With a single concise slash, he easily defeated them. Growing ever more confident, Sarlis shouted, "You're blocking my way. This one strike of mine will finish you." Upon saying this, Sarlis charged straight at the alpha. Then he leapt high and cried, "Take this." In a flash, Sarlis cut a decisive slash across the big one's body, making blood gush out quickly, which excited Sarlis somewhat. The alpha screamed in pain, yet very quickly it healed its wounds. Under the circumstances, Sarlis was astonished and thought, are the bites on its body regenerating by themselves? While he was lost in thought, the monster moved up and attacked before he realized. In moments, desperate screams rang out. Despite that, Sarlis remained unharmed. He blinked in surprise. Jin had appeared with his power and saved Sarlis's life. Jin sneered and asked, "Are you done with your little performance?" Seeing him, Sarlis stammered, You. Before he could finish, he had to dodge attacks from the little ones. Watching them, Sarlis wondered, these creatures can still move. Meanwhile, Jin was subtly moving his hand, and the next moment he snapped his fingers, and in an instant, the juveniles were felled by a single move. In the current situation, Sarlis was utterly baffled. He looked at the fallen young creature and wondered, what on earth is happening? At that moment, a distant voice suddenly called out, "Grandma, run this way, hurry up." It was Hakuma's group. Upon seeing Sarlis, they panicked and shouted, "Sarlis." However, as soon as the words ended, both the village chief and Hakuma's father were stunned and shocked by the scene before them. The chief stood dumbfounded, thinking, what the heck is happening before my eyes? What terrible thing is this? A body so gigantic and massive can be stopped with just one hand. Then Jin suddenly said, "It's starting to feel heavier. Everyone step back for now." At his prompt, Sarlis was puzzled. Jin said no more and simply pulled him away. Just as expected, the monster lunged at them. This left Sarlis even more astonished. After being saved by Jin, he asked, "What the hell are you?" Jin replied calmly, "Those creatures can regenerate instantly no matter how much damage you inflict. That's why we have to use nanoparticles to seal off their regenerative ability." The more he heard, the more puzzled Sarlis became. Nanoparticles. Jin stood up lightly and explained further. "It's what people like you call divine power. Your attack just now wasn't bad. Too bad it was too shallow to trigger the anti-regeneration effect." Hearing this, Sarlis, looking confused, asked, "Are you really the guardian deity of legend?" Jin answered nonchalantly, "I'm no god at all. But there's one thing I need to make clear to you. You insisted this was a matter solely for your village, right?" Sarlis stammered in agreement. "Yes, that's right. That's why I didn't let him finish speaking." Jin interjected, "You're very wrong. This matter is actually my problem." At this moment, the monster quickly returned to full vigor and charged straight at him. Jin, nimble-bodied, easily dodged every strike. Watching closely, he calculated silently. "First, I'll lock down all its movements." With that thought done, he flicked his fingers, and a small tentacle detonated. In moments, it spread across the monster in all directions, causing it to cry out in intense pain. While Sarlis gaped at the scene, Jin continued, "These freaks are monsters born from our own stupidity. Because of that, someone who survived from an era 100 million years ago like me must take responsibility and personally finish cleaning up this mess. With that, Jin gathered lightning power in his hands, preparing to strike. This only made Sarlis more incredulous and suspicious. I don't really understand everything you're saying, but can you actually do it? Jin replied firmly, definitely. Because I am a product forged by human civilization, carrying a blood-soaked history of long, endless years, full of brutality and tragic suffering. The last surviving human being, and at that moment, Jin unleashed his immense power at the monster, making the surrounding water surge. The monster gaped its massive jaws wide, then took Jin's blow head-on. A horrifying scene followed. With a single move, he effortlessly annihilated the creature. The sight naturally left Hakuma's group stunned. Everyone gawked in complete amazement. Hakuma even broke into a bright, excited smile. Jin's power far exceeded ordinary imagination, blasting straight through Earth's atmosphere. After his strike, the monster was finally defeated. Sarlis was terrified, drenched in sweat with a face full of unbelievable panic. Meanwhile, Jin remained calmly assertive, that cutting-edge scientific weapon. As he finished speaking, a faint smile curved his lip. Not far from Jin, a rustling sound suddenly arose. The girl hiding in the bushes had witnessed everything and was filled with stunned surprise. I came to investigate the invader spotted near Kodama village, but instead I just saw an unbelievable scene. What was that power just now? Even the captain of the knights in the capital might not pull that off. This is really serious. I need to rush back to the capital immediately to report everything to the guildmaster. With that thought, the magnifying glass girl beamed with giddy excitement. As night fell, a voice echoed from a corner of the forest. Can you hear me? Jin, if you're listening to this, it's likely I no longer exist in this world. Kagura laughed triumphantly. I've always wanted to say a classic movie line like this. So what's the future world like through your eyes now? The global environment must have improved a lot, right? But there's one problem, Jin repeated, puzzled. A problem? Kagura didn't mince words. I'll get straight to the point. Even if ecosystems recover, the corrupted creatures won't be completely eradicated. Jin narrowed his eyes slightly. Just then Kagura noticed. I've begun to sense something amiss. From about a millennium after you entered cryosleep, I too had to undergo periodic hibernation to directly observe the world's changes. Thanks to nature's revival, the number of corrupted creatures has dropped significantly. When satellites widened their view over the red zone, however, they clearly captured a grotesque silhouette and a black steed wreaking destruction. That figure radiated murderous intent. The screen quickly went dark. Kagura grew increasingly worried. With changing natural conditions, evolutionary variants of the corrupted are beginning to emerge. I'm not sure which direction they'll mutate, but they'll definitely become an unpredictable menace. All I could do then was prepare the newly born life forms to have at least a fighting chance against those monsters, even if just a little, and at the same time leave a reserve source of power just for you. Mentioning that, Jin unconsciously slipped his hand into his pocket. Power. He held the syringe with mounting suspicion. You mean this thing in front of me? Kagura's voice continued. Once you activate it, the nanoparticles will automatically guide you how to operate. Through the process of human augmentation, you're the only individual perfectly compatible with the nano and can wield this power. After the injection, the thing in Jin's hand vanished, leaving him a bit deflated. Suddenly, a dagger appeared in the palm of his hand. Jin began to suspect. So this is the ability to create materials by restructuring the shape of nanoparticulates. This thing is really handy. Kagura proudly added, I've hidden similar upgrade energy sources in secret research facilities scattered across the planet. I didn't keep them all in one place to hedge against risk. If they fall into the hands of the corrupted, it prevents everything from being destroyed at once. And also because I want you yourself to go and explore the wide world out there. Kagura said honestly, I can't predict the level of danger the corrupted will pose in the distant future. Even so, compared to the ravaged world of the past, things must be much better now. Nearby, Agus stopped his horse when he heard a strange sound. Is that the sound of hurried footsteps? The owner turned out to be the brown-haired girl. Thanks to the peace, the town had long since fallen into deep sleep. Here and there a candle still flickered for reading. Kagura smiled to reassure Jin. So for now, just enjoy this new world. At that moment the screen glitched and an aged figure remained. I won't be able to be by your side to witness it with you in person. Jin couldn't hide the surprise deep in his eyes. Old Kagura left a final message. Everything depends on you, Jin. The box returned to its original shape and Jin grew silent. I understand. Just then two small figures ran up. Oh, guardian deity. Hakuma ran up joyfully when she saw him. So you're here. Danpo tiredly told Jin. Everyone's been frantically looking for you. Both clung to his hands and pleaded, please come back quickly. The party can't start without the guest of honor. Jin froze slightly. What he had just seen hanging around Hakuma's neck is that the access key to the research institute. Letting himself be pulled, Jin asked the girl, "Hakuma, where did you get that pendant?" Hakuma touched the key doubtfully. "This one." She answered honestly, "My family received it from a great person long, long ago. It's a talisman passed down through many generations. They say if the village falls into danger, this will guide the guardian deity to protect us." Jin smiled gently upon learning the news. "I see, no wonder the girl could get inside. It seems I owe them a pretty big favor." In the village, a bonfire burned as everyone gathered happily. They all looked up at the flurry of noises. "This way, hurry up." Everyone shared the same question. Is that really the guardian deity from the rumors? They couldn't help sizing him up head to toe. "Are you kidding me? No matter how you look at him, he's just some lowly nobody." The man kept taunting, unaware of Sarla's seething. That scrawny guy actually defeated that monster. Jin quickly spotted that group. Sarlis immediately swung at the loudmouth's face. "What would you know when you were busy running for your lives?" Shandy asked the other, flustered. "Are you all right? I'm truly sorry for the rudeness." Sarlis shouted loudly, "Our god, the guardian deity, is truly extraordinary." Hakuma, surprised, flipped her attitude a full 180 degrees. Thankfully, this made Dampo feel light as air, as if he'd become a different person from this afternoon. The village chief cheerfully stepped forward from the back. "So you're here." Jin politely greeted, "Good day, village chief." She carefully sought his opinion. "Allow me, on behalf of the villagers, to say this once more. We offer you our deepest thanks." The man beside her was also deeply grateful. "If you hadn't appeared in time, this entire village would surely have been wiped out. We would very much like to repay this favor." Jin gave a modest smile. "Don't worry about it." The man still wanted to give thanks, but Jin said plainly, "If you really insist, I don't need material rewards. What I need now is information. I want detailed information about the current state of this world." He was stunned for a few seconds by the odd request. The state of the whole world. The village chief suggested to Jin, "If that's the case, you'd best make a trip to the capital." The name was fairly unfamiliar to Jin. The capital. The chief explained that it was where the king resides, ruling the kingdom of Kermosia. People from all regions gather there, so they surely have the most up-to-date news about the outside world. We villagers of Kodama also often go there to trade our specialty wood silk. The chief nodded to Jin. "The road ahead is long and fraught with danger, but I believe with the guardian deity's power it will be fine." However, for Jin there was one difficulty, "But I don't know the way." She patted the girl beside her and instructed, "Let Hakuma go with you as your guide. She has business to attend to in the capital anyway." Jin, curious, asked, "Personal business?" The chief did not hide it. "Surely you've seen. This child has the ability to use divine power. In the capital, there's an academy that trains and helps people develop that kind of sacred power. We had considered giving up due to recent turmoil, but I still hope she can enroll as originally planned." Jin suddenly realized schools still existed in this era. Then another voice interjected, "Wait, everyone hold on." Sarlis confidently volunteered, "I'm the one more deserving to guide the guardian deity." The village chief was puzzled. "You don't have any business in the capital," Sarlis asserted, nostrils flaring. "I do. I intend to join the ranks of holy knights in the capital." The chief could only sigh. "You didn't even pass the academy entrance exam, so what makes you think you can get in?" Sarlis, slapped down, got angry. "Old woman, what did you just say?" Jin cut in with a question. "Isn't having divine power enough to be admitted?" Hakuma immediately reminded him. "You still have to take a written exam." Sarlis, being a fool, failed it. Amid the noisy quarrel, Jin finally understood. He considered seriously. "Holy Knight, sounds interesting. I admit I'm getting curious." Elsewhere, Argus had just received the report. A giant invading monster appeared at Kodama village, and it's already been killed, the girl replied firmly. "Absolutely correct, sir." Still, he asked again, "Are you sure everything you're saying is true?" The girl hurriedly confirmed. "I swear it's true, sir. In fact, I'm on my way back to report to the guild master." This news left Argus silent. "I thought without a holy knight it couldn't be defeated, so I came here on my own without waiting for orders from the guild. Never expected someone else already sorted it out." The girl exclaimed with joy, not noticing a foot nearby. "Honestly, I didn't expect to meet a holy knight out in such a remote place. What a coincidence." A monster suddenly appeared as if to snatch her. Argus reflexively finished off the monster, much to the girl's terror. What had just happened made him believe the story a bit more. "If what you say is true, then this is indeed interesting." Anticipation rose in Argus. "I'm actually starting to get excited to meet that person myself." The sun climbed higher, its gentle light bringing a fresh, peaceful morning to Kodama village. Jin stepped out and admired the warm scene, unable to help exclaiming, "What a fine early morning. The air is so fresh and pleasant. Before him were verdant mountains and birds soaring above. Jin couldn't believe he was finally seeing such sights with his own eyes. He shaded his eyes with a hand, a little wistful. If only Kagura could see this with me. Then Shandy came from behind carrying clothes. Your guardian deity, sir. The boy, seeing him half naked, offered, please put these clothes on, sir. Suddenly, it was time to send Jin off from the village. The village chief and several others gathered around Hakama. She looked at the girl and instructed, Hakama, remember to do your job as guide properly. The girl replied politely, I understand. Sarlis turned away, annoyed, and said, I used to think I'd learn so much by being near the guardian deity. The chief sighed, first you need to focus on your studies. He snapped back, shut up. Seeing that, Jin spoke to encourage him. You're Sarlis, right? Your movement techniques yesterday weren't bad at all. Sarlis's face flushed red in surprise when he heard, I'll wait for you at the royal capital. Hearing that, he burst into ecstatic shouts. I'll definitely come. I'll study as hard as I can. While the crowd roared behind them, Hakama's father stepped forward, shook Jin's hand and entrusted, Guardian deity, please look after Hakama for me. Then he bent and placed his hand on the girl's small shoulder and said, Hakama, just take care of your health, that's enough. The girl answered, yes, sir. After farewells, he and Hakama waved goodbye. Well then, I'm off. The two, one grown, one small, set off together. They followed the stream beside the path as they walked. The sky began to blush pink. Jin stopped at a waterfall so Hakama could drink. They continued on. As the sun slipped behind the mountain gap, the sky stayed rosy in the warm evening light, and the girl excitedly pointed ahead. Night fell and they sat by the campfire to rest. Jin asked, how far is it to the royal capital from here? Hakama, chewing a piece of cake, replied, we still have about 4 days of walking. He was somewhat pleased and said, closer than I expected. The girl hesitated slightly and called out, hey, guardian deity. Jin replied, yes. Hakama asked curiously, why do you want to learn so much about this world? He took on a mysterious air and answered, that's a secret. The girl wondered, a secret again. That question left Jin staring off into thought. The corrupted ones had not been exterminated. That was what Kagura had insisted. He thought back to the past and became more certain. It was true. The corrupted still existed in this era. He sank back into those thoughts. Usually they only thrive in heavily polluted environments. Yet that place. He stared at the blazing fire before him and silently confirmed, something unusual is definitely happening. Seeing Jin so silent made Hakama worry and interrupt his thoughts. Guardian deity, your face looks terrifying right now. He replied, sorry, I'm just lost in thought. Jin looked intently at the girl and thought to himself, at least there are still people living in this age, people not under the control of the corrupted. Hakama tilted her head, puzzled by Jin's calculating gaze. First, I need to study how people today cope with the corrupted. As for the corrupted themselves, I can research them gradually later. Hakama asked, by the way, what should I call you? He answered, just call me Jin. The girl started, Sir Jin. He cut her off, you don't need the sir. Obediently she said, Jin. Suddenly, someone rode a horse up from the distance. The two heard the noise and reflexively turned to look. The newcomer hurried to speak, sorry to disturb your rest. He and 2 riders behind him approached and asked, may I have a few minutes? The man's face bore an imposing look as he regarded. Jin asked, puzzled, who are you? Argus glanced down at him and introduced himself. We belong to the Holy Cavalry of the Royal Capital. I'm captain of Squad 7. My name is Argus Ult. He couldn't help blurting, Holy Cavalry, wondering if this was the person they'd mentioned earlier. Suddenly, Karina clenched her teeth, looking annoyed. She then shouted, what's with your attitude toward our captain? At least stand up and salute. Then she turned to Argus as he dismounted and declared, such insolence. Captain, it's definitely them. He cut in, easy, Karina. Argus stepped up to Jin and held out his hand. Please forgive me for speaking to you from horseback. Would you mind talking with me a moment? Jin stood somewhat curious and asked, what did she mean by it's definitely them earlier? Argus didn't answer that directly, instead saying, on behalf of my subordinates, I apologize for the rudeness. But Argus grilled him. First, I need you to answer a few questions. Where did you two come from, and where are you headed next? Hakama munched her cake and honestly replied, we came from Kodama village and are heading to the royal capital. He asked suspiciously, from Kodama village. Upon hearing that, Karina smiled strangely. She leapt off her horse and affirmed, I'm still certain it's them. Karina gripped her sword tightly, brimming with fury, and shouted, there are no birth records of a low-born race in Kodama village. It's all been exposed. Low-class scum. Hearing that, Jin looked surprised and thought, so they even have birth records here. This country's bureaucracy is pretty strict, huh? Suddenly, Argus cut that mood off with, no. The remark made the girl pause, huh? He looked at Hakama and explained, the outfit that girl is wearing is a specialty of the Kodama region. It's Kodama silk. Even in the capital, it's sold at high prices because it's considered extremely fine clothing. With that assessment, Argus became more certain and asserted, Kodama silk made for children is extremely rare on the market, so the girl's claim to be from Kodama village is likely true. Those words left Karina flustered, but suddenly he drew the sword at his side, indicating intent. However, the blade he pointed straight at Jin and declared, "You, on the other hand, are completely different." Argus eyed Jin's clothing and evaluated. "The clothes you're wearing look very strange. Which country are they?" He reported that along the route from Kodama village to the royal capital, there have been repeated robberies by bandit gangs that use children to steal goods. Argus's gaze hardened with his inference. That fits the situation of you two right now. They often operate by pretending to be innocent. Hearing this, Hakama panicked and loudly protested. "It wasn't us," he replied coldly. "That will be for us to judge." The girl clenched her teeth, showing her worry at the current situation. Determined, Hakama then unleashed her divine power. Argus, sensing her intention, frowned. He made glowing swords appear around Hakama and barked, "Don't try anything here." The girl frowned, struggling with her predicament. Argus, surprised, remarked, "I didn't expect you to possess divine power. You seem quite promising." Jin quietly observed Hakama's form and thought, so she's indeed a holy cavalrywoman. Seeing the authority he projected, Jin had to admit to himself, "I get it, he's really strong." Argus maintained that stance and demanded, "Answer me now. Where exactly did you come from? It depends on your testimony." Then he threatened he would decide whether to lop off your head right here and now. Jin remained silent. His face paled at the unpleasant remark. Argus pointed the tip of his sword at Jin and pressed, "Answer me quickly. Where do you actually come from? What you're about to say." He frowned, staring at him. "Never drop your guard. I'll decide whether your head stays or goes." Despite the threat, Jin was unmoved and stubbornly remained silent. His face darkened, eyes cold as a blade. Argus's presence was equally formidable, his gaze unwaveringly fixed on his opponent. Faced with his persistence and composure, Jin sighed in resignation. "I'm from Kodama village." The moment Karina behind Argus heard that name, she exploded. "What? That's clearly a lie." Ignoring the girl's suspicion, he accepted the statement, sheathed his sword. "I see." This left the girl puzzled. "Wait, Captain." Argus turned to Hakama, standing before him to verify. "You're not lying, are you?" The girl asserted confidently. "Jin truly is the guardian deity of our Kodama village." He was slightly startled to hear this. Guardian deity, but did not continue to interrogate. "So that's it." Watching Argus prepare to leave, Jin was a bit surprised. "Are your questions finished?" "Yes." He vaulted onto his horse, looking apologetic. "I still have matters to attend to. Please forgive my rudeness earlier." But Karina wasn't ready to let Jin go. She shouted, "Oh, Captain." Ignoring her yelling, Argus asked Jin, "Are you two also heading toward the capital?" "Yes, I see. Then we'll surely run into each other again." He offered help in good faith. "If you run into trouble later, come find me. Consider it my apology for today's incident." Karina screamed again. Argus urged his horse onward. "Then excuse me for disturbing you." The girl, stunned and confused by his action, asked, "What, are you serious?" She called after the captain, "Wait for me." Jin watched them ride off and could only give a wry smile. Cut to Argus's troop moving toward the capital. Karina kept peppering him with questions. "Why did you choose to withdraw?" She continued, flailing her arms as she demanded. "No matter how you look at it, that low-born one is extremely suspicious." Argus stayed silent, lost in thought. "A low-born one, huh?" Finally he spoke. "I'm wondering who the weaker party really is." Karina was baffled by Argus's words. "Excuse me." Ria, riding beside him, agreed. "Exactly." This made Karina even more puzzled. "Even you think so, Senior Ria?" Ria tilted her head slightly at Karina. "You didn't notice that." Ria recalled how powerful the energy around Jin had been, the enormous gap in strength between us and that man. Argus continued, his face somber. "I tried to strike 2 or 3 times to test him, but," he remembered, pointing his sword at Jin, "and his sword simply couldn't move." Jin, meanwhile, casually put his hands in his pockets and used his power to stop the blade. The fight's outcome was decided before it began. He countered before I could even twitch. Ria looked at Argus with concern. "Captain, did you use your divine power?" "Yes." His admission made Karina gasp in alarm. "I couldn't even activate mine. At that moment I planned the same trick I used on Hakama, to borrow similar power, but the spirits refused to lend me their strength." Ria had to admit, "I was in the exact same situation." Karina only belatedly realized what that meant. Argus added, "It also means there's an enormous gap in divine power between the two sides to perform such a feat." His expression darkened as he grasped the gravity of the matter. Perhaps within this entire cavalry, Only the Grand Commander could match him. Karina and Ria both started at that. The girl ground her teeth. I kind of blame myself for not sensing anything. Argus sympathized fully. That's simply because he's an abnormal existence, and you only just joined the unit. Everyone buzzed, so the one who killed the invading monsters, could that be him? Most likely. Karina still felt uneasy. Are we really going to let them leave so easily? Isn't that too dangerous? Argus was helpless. I don't know their identities, but they don't seem hostile. For now, let's quietly observe. Setting that aside, he turned and reminded everyone, now let's head back to the capital. We wrapped up the invading monster incident earlier than expected, but we can't be absent any longer. I'll hand the bandit matter over to the guild. Understood, sir. Ria turned to admonish Karina after today's events. Focus on building character, not just chasing power. Argus rode ahead, still thinking, the guardian deity of Kodama village. Lost in thought, his troop had quietly neared the capital. If that person became our ally, Argus wanted to seize the opportunity. They could be the key to solving the kingdom's thorniest problem. Cut to Jin and Hakama also marching toward the capital. He sighed. Yesterday was quite the interesting encounter. He wondered, do all the knights in the capital have fearsome power like theirs? The girl denied it. No, they're exceptions. Hakama could immediately recognize them, the Holy Cavalry. They're an elite group carefully chosen from the best of the knights, and those two were among the finest in that elite corps. She kept praising their strength, their speed of summoning spirits. No, their spirit magic is on a completely different level. Jin was puzzled. Spirit magic. Hakama explained. It's the art of summoning spirits from the elements and borrowing power from them. He nodded. I see. They call nanoparticles spirits, do they? He walked on, thinking. In this era, science seems like pure fantasy. Suddenly, Jin remembered Karina fiercely pointing her sword at him and shouting, you low-born trash. He sighed, and the whole low-born race thing. This helped him deduce. It seems this era has countless different races, right? Yes, sir. Hakama described some common races. Some look exactly like fish, others resemble insects. Jin was surprised. Insect. She explained more about the cause. My grandmother used to say it was because habitats shrank long ago. That caused races to develop different appearances. Bodies gradually changed to adapt to where they live. Jin was astonished by this new information. Evolution driven by environmental pressure, huh? He mulled it over. So that means some people survived from 100 million years ago, and humans back then evolved into these forms. Worrying about it now solved nothing. Jin finally understood why he was looked down on. So those who didn't evolve are called lowborn. Yes, Hakama knew this world well. That's why society scorns the lowborn, those who didn't adapt to the environment, because they're seen as back. She added more about this world. Most people sold into slavery are also from lowborn races. Jin gritted his teeth at that, so slavery still exists here. Hakama was outraged by the discrimination too, but in reality there's no big difference. They're just a bit different from the majority, yet they're treated so bad. She was furious. It's completely wrong. Jin smiled and praised her. You're a good child. Suddenly an old man with a cane stepped out and blocked their path. His voice was hoarse and weary as he begged for help. Help me. Then he collapsed to his knees. Hakama rushed over, worried. Are you all right? She quickly ran to him, those ears. Jin slowly leaned in to take a closer look. He lay collapsed on the ground, gasping for breath, heavy breathing, his body covered in wounds and bruises. His ears were exactly like a human's, with no alteration at all. Those ears were strained. He lay on the dirt, filthy and panting. Jin stood there, hand on his chin, observing, bruises all over. These injuries are really severe. Hakama sat beside him and slowly helped him up. You okay? Jin reached out a hand and used his power. Hold on a bit, I'll heal your wounds right now. Suddenly something flashed in his eye. He froze and listened when the boy spoke. Don't move, absolutely. One hand held a knife, the other clamped around the girl's throat threateningly. If you so much as twitch, I'll kill this little girl immediately. The three of them were shoved into this terrifying standoff. Jin calmly looked down and thought, so that's how it is. He looked at the boy, gritting his teeth with a knife to Hakama. We've walked right into your trap. His gaze flicked elsewhere, thinking, which means those guys are somewhere nearby. In the distance, a shadowy man stepped forward, so there really was someone capable of coordinating with her. This man appeared with a long beard. You did well on the mission, Poweru. A man followed by his underlings said, you followed orders to the letter. In Jin's head a thought formed. That's the camo invisibility technique. The image of a silhouette with arrows pointing at it surfaced in his mind. It works by capturing surrounding visuals and using ultrafine nanoparticles to render the user invisible. He stood calmly before them thinking. The only weakness is movement revealing the disguise, but they operated it extremely skillfully. The other guy still had his sword pointed at his face. A low-born creature like you dressed pretty sharp, huh? Which country are you from? The sword pressed closer to Jin's neck. Stay calm, don't be foolish and move. Hakama on the other side struggled to break free and shouted, Lord Jin, the man taunted. You know what'll happen if you try anything, right? Over there, the girl was clutching her stomach with her power. He shouted loudly, Hakama. The girl then quieted down. Jin finally spoke. That kind of power isn't meant to be used on people. You do realize that, don't you? The girl screamed in panic, but the man still pointed his sword at him but turned his head. We've hit the jackpot, boss. Can't believe that kid actually has divine power. A teammate standing nearby asked, You can use it too, right? He turned and replied, Who knows? The man snapped angrily. What was that? Then he stamped a kick into Jin's stomach. Jin doubled over and screamed in pain. Lord Jin, the man's boot remained on him. Don't get cocky, lowly creature. The man in front of him warned, careful not to damage the precious merchandise. He closed his eyes and grimaced. After all, a lowborn won't fetch much money. He continued, but what if they have divine power? There's no way the lowly should hold such power. Hakama thought, these guys. The girl's face filled with fear. She thought, surely these are the bandits the holy cavalry mentioned. What miserable people. The man slowly stepped toward the girl with power crackling in his hand. All right then, take a short nap. The girl thought to herself, if we just sit here and get caught like this. The hand full of power pressed near Hakama's face, making her flinch back in fear. Both of them will be sold off as slaves. A dark hush drifted by. Jin stood right in front of her calling, Hakama, wake up. Hey Hakama. She replied slowly, Lord Jin. Then the girl jerked awake in terror. His muscular frame sat beside her. Are you hurt anywhere? She turned to him. I'm fine, more importantly. It turned out they were in iron cages, and there were many victims outside. Where have they locked us up? Jin turned his face away. This is the lair of the ones who attacked. Looking at the prisoners in those iron cages, it seems the others captured were all confined here. The bodies of some inside were nothing but skin and bone. One poor blue-haired girl was clutching her frail frame. The two of them sat there full of anxiety. Hakama looked at him. By the way, why are you naked like that? Jin bowed his head and winced. They stripped me clean. They found my clothes odd. Lucky for me, they left my underpants. The girl sat dazed and said, You don't seem worried about that at all. He glanced away. Anyway, most of my past life I walked around bare-chested. The girl's innocent face looked at him. Put that aside. Why didn't you fight back then? With your strength, you could have easily taken them down. Lord Jin. On the other side, the soldier who opened the door stepped in with the boy from before. Finish this quickly. The two of them then turned to look at the dirty boy holding 2 loaves of bread. So you've been awake this whole time. Hakama stood up, gripping the bars, and shouted. The boy sat down and handed bread to her. I don't mind that you hate me. Then he calmly stood and looked down, because I never dared hope for forgiveness in the first place. Hakama could only grit her teeth and cling to the bars. Jin spoke to get his attention, truly very merciful. He looked down in alarm. Merciful? Jin retorted, a true villain. If he sits there yearning at the sky, he'll never waste time wondering whether he's hated or pardoned, or something like that. Then he slowly stood, drawing their attention. All right, let's begin. Jin gripped the bars of the cage tightly. This terrified the boy. He stood next to the cage he had easily broken, to the boy's astonishment. Hakama stood behind, dusting her hands off. I've been patiently waiting. No one's eavesdropping on our conversation here. The boy replied, waiting for me. His face showed panic at hearing him. Jin, where is the person most important to you being held? He bowed cautiously. How did you know that? Jin slowly stepped forward, his hand full of power. It was just my guess. The boy fell silent before the power in front of him. From the start, she even deceived me. The bruises on her body were entirely real. Only then did he look, surprised, at the bruises when Jin mentioned them. But even villains wouldn't beat their own comrades this savagely just to exploit them. So I saw through it early on. He was amazed at Jin's insight. I realized they were using force to threaten her into obeying their demands. Then his hands clasped together, trembling in panic, and he slowly spoke, my little brother, he's been taken by them. Recalling how they were torn apart in agony, and my parents. He cried out bitterly. They both were brutally murdered by those bastards. He clutched his shirt with tears streaming down. So I had no choice but to protect my brother's life at all costs. Hakama stood behind, watching him grip his hands and said, that's the only reason I did it. Jin's face darkened with menace upon hearing their crimes. They're scum, all of them. The girl beside him looked up. So you deliberately let the bandits imprison them to rescue them, he replied. That was part of the plan. But he added, evil people are stubborn and greasy. They're like stubborn oil stains. Another voice asked, oil stain. The soldier at the door said, If even one escapes, they'll breed again and cause more disaster. Those words echoed, making the man look over in surprise. So, if we've decided to wipe them out. Then Jin came up from behind and kicked so hard that both the door and the man flew off. He grabbed the ruined doorframe with his hand clenched there, face terrifying. We must root them out without a trace, sweep them away thoroughly and mercilessly. When it comes to scum, I know them better than anyone. 100 million years ago, in a bustling infrastructural city, young Jin appeared, filthy and grimy. He watched the news about a successful capture of a drug kingpin. As for me, I've always yearned to enforce justice. A car stopped behind where he stood in the street. A foot appeared right behind Jin, but I soon realized one thing. His eyes casually glanced over. A world still needs justice. 3 brutal thugs stood there, really just human scum, and they're multiplying everywhere. The leader, with a cigarette in his mouth, hoisted Jin up. If I could live a normal life, that would be ideal. But his face was indifferent. The circumstances I grew up in wouldn't allow that to happen. He was still in that man's grip. So, shortly after, Jin raised one hand and snapped the man's arm to the side. I crushed. Then he kicked straight into his stomach, mercilessly. To this day, he grew up strict and destructive toward them. He casually sat atop the pile of bodies he had slain. I just kept sweeping them away. Suddenly, someone stood before the mound of bodies where he sat. And one day, someone said to me that. This made him start and frown. Kagura now reached out as if to grab him. You were born in the wrong world. Back in the present, Jin was dragging someone, crawling along the ground. The 2 soldiers ground their teeth and backed away, stammering, "Stop right now." Many more soldiers lay sprawled on the ground. What do you actually want? He kept asking as more of his men fell. How did you get all the way in here? Jin smiled, a terrifying grin. Then he hurled a guy flying straight toward them. The man stood there, stunned, catching him in disbelief. Jin then darted forward with nimble strikes. But the man could only stand there, terrified, watching Jin land a punch that smashed into his face, while a voice called from behind. You bastard, who the hell are you? He sat on the floor, cradling his comrade in his arms, panic-stricken. Meanwhile, those locked in the iron cages were being released. Paoru looked visibly worried. That shout was. She hurriedly and fearfully asked, "What kind of being is your companion? A god?" Hakama turned calmly and answered, "He's a guardian spirit. Yes, a god." The girl looked up confidently and said, "Leave it to Lord Jin. He'll handle it." She looked back as they prepared to leave. For now, do exactly as Jin says. Get everyone out of here. Thinking anxiously, can we really escape? She gritted her teeth in hatred thinking of that man. But that guy has an enormous reserve of holy power. There's no way Jin could beat him with brute strength alone. At that moment, the man was panicking on the floor. Wait. Jin grabbed another man's head in front of him. What are you pleading for? Money, right? The man laughed nervously. Ah, no. He pointed at the boy sitting in the iron cage. Or do you want a slave? Looking at that boy, so pitiable, just like him as a child, he added, if so, I'll give you as many as you want. Jin glanced over without a word, then shoved him to the floor and sprayed red syrup. Have you gotten everything off your chest? The man sat sweating, thinking, what the hell is even happening? He stared at Jin in fear, thinking, why is my holy magic useless like this? Jin stepped closer in a terrifying way. The man clenched his teeth and thought, what kind of demonic power does he possess? As Jin closed in, he said, you're just a half-baked villain. The man was still listening to him. True heavyweights choose to flee immediately. Jin frowned down at him. And guys like you start by spouting insults and are convinced you'll surely win. The next words pushed the man over the edge. Then at the first taste of defeat, you begin to beg pathetically. He thought, disgusting. Then he bolted. If that's the case, I have no choice left. He slapped down a switch and shouted, not yet, this isn't over. But he grinned wickedly as the door closed. A monster appeared behind the door. Jin stood there stunned, while the man still sneered. I specially acquired this at someone's request. This huge, terrifying monster stomped forward and said in a heavy voice, if sweet talk doesn't work, so be it. The man beamed, I'll make you. The monster in front of Jin opened its maw and unleashed purple energy along with the man's words. Become pathetic and shattered. Then it thrust out an arm. Jin glanced up cautiously, crossing his arms over his head as it prepared to strike. Suddenly the man looked surprised. It turned out the monster's punch was gently stopped by his 2 arms. You see, I was born with an extraordinary body. As he caught the blow and looked over, compared to ordinary people, I seemed to have more muscle fibers than him. Then Jin pushed it straight up. Well, he leapt with green power coiling around his arms. I won't go easy on someone who's corrupted. And as he thrust his hand out, a streak of bright green force shot forth. And I'll also use holy power. Immediately the monster started leaking fluids all over the floor, terrifying the man to his core. Then Jin stood before him, thinking he can use holy power too. Then he said, so. His face calm as ever. Now, what do you plan to do next? The man's face, drenched in sweat, was speechless. His hands clasped together and trembling. Can you please turn a blind eye and spare me this time? Before Jin could do anything, he smashed a crooked punch into the man. I can't. Jin shrugged into his coat. All right then. He turned his back and walked away, leaving the punched man sitting there to think. I got my clothes back. Then he looked at the iron cage with 4 children inside. Sorry, but please wait a bit longer. Jin's words made the 4 kids feel like they'd seen the light again. I'll get everyone out of here soon. He stood at the desk and picked up some files. But first I have a few things to investigate. It's pointless if I don't gather evidence of their crime. He opened a drawer and found stacks of papers. Oh. Sitting at the desk holding a sheet, he thought, this looks extremely suspicious. Weird lines of writing appeared on the paper. Jin smiled, I get it, but immediately his head filled with question marks as he read them. What on earth are these lines about? I don't understand a single word. He stood there watching the other man slump to the floor. I'll have to get Hakama to teach me how to read the language of this era. Then he sat down and touched the fluids from the monster. Still, what do they plan to do after capturing the corrupted ones? Waves of power appeared as he touched them. It's time to find out the truth. The electronic screens around them ran. I'll access the cameras from the nanos floating around. Jin sat there looking down, thinking. Any footage from the past week should still be stored here. His gaze rose, menacing. Recalling earlier in the monster's pen, the man stood behind him. But sir, how do you intend to deal with such a large net? He replied. That's not something you need to worry about. He gave a chilling smile. However, I think I'll reveal one thing to you. He glanced up, dangerous. Very soon, a highly interesting event is about to take place in this nation. At that moment, Jin stood before the screen, frowning. The next day, in an old-fashioned village, the freed people were lined up here. Hakama and Paoru were also standing here, watching. Suddenly, she jumped, having seen something. Nino ran over from Jin when she called, Nino, sis. The 2 cousins rushed into each other's arms, sobbing. They held each other tightly as Paoru cried, thank goodness, thank the heavens. She grabbed her sister's hand and looked up at him. Sir, we are truly grateful. He replied to them, I'm no deity, but don't worry too much about that. Then Jin glanced to the side. By the way, may I ask? Looking toward the people being led in line under guard, are the ones rounding up those robbers under the regional lord's command? Hakama beside him answered, no, they're from the guild. I called them. The 2 of them discussed Padoraku. The man standing over there is the guild master of this town. He asked, is that so? He turned his face that way, then stepped up to the 2 of them. Are you the one who took care of this matter? Jin answered, yes. Padoraku raised his hand and bowed with his men. My name is Padoraku, guildmaster. I offer you my deepest thanks for your assistance. Then he glanced upward. Jin stood there making him think, capable of facing so many foes without a scratch. He looked like a low-tier race, but my gut says otherwise. Thoughts popped into his head. This boy cannot be ordinary. Then he spoke. We've recently received many reports of losses related to this chain of incidents. The guild has faced countless pleas to eliminate this bandit group. Jin replied, so the local lord isn't the one sending troops to capture them. Padoraku put a hand on his hip. You must be joking. A lord doesn't have that kind of authority. A vision of him kneeling before his superiors appeared with the narration. The only ones with authority to handle crimes like this are guild members, those who have sworn loyalty to the king. He gestured as he spoke. Even if the regional lord, Sir Sappy, breaks the law, we still have an obligation to report that to the king, although that rarely happens. Jin put a hand to his chin thinking, in terms of 100 million years ago, a lord is like a mayor, and the guild is similar to the police. His head churned with unsettling thoughts about the man, but Shappian. He then produced a rolled document for him. This is material I obtained from those people. Might it be of use to you? Padoraku opened it and was astonished. This is a list of those who have been secretly dealing with the bandit. He continued reading. With this in hand, we can round them all up in one go. He asked, does the name of the local lord appear on it? Jin frowned at the answer. Don't take my earlier joke seriously, of course not. He also thought to himself, I see, I must be quite the formidable villain. He looked at Paoru, puzzled, and thought, there's nothing more I can do right now. More importantly, Jin placed a hand on Paoru's little brother's head, turned to the man and asked, what will happen to those freed slaves? What will become of their futures? Padoraku replied, for those with a request for search or whose identities have been verified, the guild will take responsibility for returning them home. The 2 children bowed their heads sadly when they heard him, but for those who don't fall into either category, we truly cannot do anything for them. He stood there thinking, if I recall correctly, these 2 have lost both parents. He then asked, is there really no care facility here? Padaraku looked aside. None at all. We can only act as intermediaries to help them find work. But looking at those poor kids, he added, since these two belong to a low-tier race, I'm afraid finding jobs for them will be extremely difficult. Jin bowed his head and sighed, thinking, I'd really like to help them, but the two children just looked at each other, and he followed their gaze, thinking, if nowhere will take them, getting work will be tough. Suddenly Jin realized something. Wait, no, hold on. Then he said to the two children, if there's a place where both of you could work, would you be willing to go? Paoru hastily replied, yes, sir. Do you already have somewhere in mind? Jin smiled, yes. He remembered Argus saying, if you ever run into trouble, come find me. Jin's face took on a slightly menacing look. There's a place that's absolutely perfect for you two. The next day, at Argus's mansion in the capital of the kingdom, Kermosia, Argus's eyes widened in alarm. Rhea rode her horse behind him. What's wrong? He sat on the lead horse. Nothing, it's fine, I just suddenly felt a chill down my spine. He then climbed down from the horse. Argus stood beside the horse and looked back. This is as far as you'll go. He stood before his troop. The long expedition has ended. Thank you all, rest well today. Then he entered the building. All the maids bowed in unison. Welcome home, Lord Argus. He turned and asked the steward, any new reports? The steward looked toward the maid, who stood there trembling. Argus closed his eyes and asked, has something happened? The steward standing nearby bowed his head. I'm truly sorry to bother you when you're exhausted. But he looked up and said, don't worry about it. He seemed worried and averted his gaze. A girl on the balcony watched the two of them walk together. It was Milia, arms folded, observing. Argus waved a hand. I understand, thank you for the report. He bowed, it's nothing. Then he put a hand to his head and sighed. The situation seems worse than I thought. He recalled the monster-harmed city residents. An invader appeared right in the capital. How on earth did it get in? Argus frowned ominously. No, someone must have deliberately released it. He remembered the grounds of a certain building. The most suspicious thing was how they fiercely forbade anyone not on duty from entering Harnick's academy. In any case, the moment Jin walking with the three children appeared, I need to quickly find allies. 3 days have passed since the campaign to suppress the bandits, and Jin is traveling with Paoru, her younger brother, and Hakama on the road. She frowned and turned to him. Are you sure there's really a suitable job for someone like me here in the capital? He glanced over. Don't worry too much. Jin kept his eyes on her. You already know how to read and write. Paoru even has a knack for arithmetic. You'll definitely find a place. He continued, just trust in your own abilities. Those words made her light up and look back. Yes, sir. Suddenly a voice called, Jin, look. Hakama pointed toward a distant castle. We've arrived. Jin's face was full of surprise as he saw the four of them gazing down at the magnificent kingdom from above. Is this the capital of that kingdom? Here the sky seemed dyed pink. The four were astonished, especially Paoru. This place looks bustling and lively. Hakama pointed to a stall across the way. The capital depends heavily on imports, so products from all regions pour in here. Items came to her mind. Villagers from Kodama often trek here to sell their specialties. Jin looked at her. I've heard that myself. He glanced at the odd-looking people nearby. I see, what an interesting place. An insect tribe, huh? He looked at 2 other types of people. So many races and civilizations converge here. No wonder unique developments spring up. Then he looked toward a stall. These are all goods imported directly from the neighboring country. The city was also kept immaculately clean. Jin looked at the children, and the security system seemed very reliable. Then he glanced at something. Yet, on the other side, a well-dressed man stood before some homeless people. He frowned and thought, perhaps every era has its own problems. Milia had been standing behind him without him noticing. He looked down at Hakama. When do you enroll? She looked up and answered, next week. She watched them walk as he said, so we still have some time to prepare. She replied, enrollment will happen right after the exams. She thought to herself, I want to apply to Harnick's academy. She held a fan over her mouth and glanced at a boy like that, and even a man of a low-tier race. That evening, a girl stood before a brightly lit house. Inside, Paoru's and Hakama's younger brothers were happily bouncing on the bed together. Jin sat on the bed too. Finally, we found a decent place to rest. The girl lying beside him replied, yeah, that's right. He stood there, hand to his mouth, thinking, now that the group has finally reached the capital of the kingdom, what should my next move be? He held a pouch of gold and thought, in any case, I still need money to survive in this era. Suddenly Hakama stepped forward, set the pouch of money on his head, and made him reflect. Although we got a reward for defeating the bandits, that money won't last forever. Father said I have to give part of it to the slaves as well. He pictured Paoru exhausted while caring for her sibling. On top of that, There's the matter of finding stable work for these two kids. He remembered Argus and thought, meeting that young man would be the quickest solution. But without an introduction, it might be hard to meet him right away. Jin put a hand to his chin and glanced around. Then he got up from the bed. Perhaps first I should conduct a thorough investigation into the corruptors of this era. He remembered the thugs from before, especially that there were people scheming to exploit them for dark purposes. Jin stood by the window with thoughts swirling. The corruptors are a terrifying threat. We absolutely can't let them run rampant. He glanced down at the bustling scene below. I will never allow that horrific era to repeat itself. He suddenly turned to Hakama and asked, what do people in this country usually do when they want to investigate or research something? The girl propped her chin on her hand on the bed. They go ask someone, find a teacher, or look up books. Then she flopped back on the bed. However, books here are very expensive. In Kodama village, we had to share a few scarce volumes. They were hard to come by. Hakama looked up, but the capital has a large library. You can definitely go there to look things up. Jin put a hand to his mouth. There's a library here. He thought, that's convenient. I'll make good use of it. Maybe I'll even find clues about the research facility Kagura left behind. A pink-haired girl sat there cheerfully. I'm very sorry, but you're not allowed to use the facilities here. The four of them were taken aback when she said, because books are considered state property, we can't allow everyone to come in freely. She continued, access is limited to accredited students recognized by the academy, faculty, and nobles residing in the capital. Jin sighed, I see. Hakama stood beside him nonchalantly. You didn't even know how to read at first, though. Jin suddenly realized, all right, I still can't read well. He recalled when Hakama and Poweru taught him in the woods. People had been teaching him lately, but he'd need more time to become proficient. He held his face and grimaced, sighing, what should I do now? Behind them, two hooded people were whispering, is that them? The other reached out and replied, that low-tier species with those kids, that's them. A voice called out, making him turn. Got a moment. As he turned, a fist came flying at him, but Jin gently caught the punch, his face growing more fearsome. A moment, huh? Your greeting is special. The guy still smiled brightly. I thought security here was supposed to be good. A golden light flashed from the grip of the two men. Then Jin released his hold, and the man's hand shot up as the golden light flared. They shot into the sky, surprising everyone. But he kept smiling and reached out. You're terribly mistaken. Your instincts are sharp, though, friend. Poweru's younger brother hugged her tightly, and she feared, thinking, did they just use magic in the middle of the city? Jin stood and asked, care to tell me your purpose? The guy raised a hand and replied, someone paid to see you lot. You look unbearable to them. Thoughts filled his eyes, so someone hired them to come here. He put a hand to his chin and thought, carry on, this actually plays into my plan. The two laughed gleefully. If you disappear from the capital right now, you won't have to worry about threats every day, got it? He replied. If things truly become dangerous, I'll consider it. The guy ignored him and threw another punch. Oh yeah. But Jin gripped his wrist tightly. The man's face went slack and drained of color. Then he gently shoved him down hard, so he landed flat on the ground. He looked like his head might roll off from the impact. The other guy's hand was held fast by a golden force. You bastard. He spat fire from behind Jin, and it seemed to envelop him in flame. This made the guy happy. But before he could celebrate, Jin stepped out of the smoke and reached for him. With one hand, Jin grabbed the collar of his shirt. He gently lifted him with one hand while the man's body trembled. If you really want to threaten me properly, then come back when you're strong. He raised his fist as if to punch, but added, if you still have the guts to challenge me again. The man was hoisted up and panicked, thinking, this guy, aren't he supposed to be a low-tier species? As the two did this, a loud shout came from the other side. That's enough. Everyone froze. Don't move. Karina appeared, frowning in annoyance. Honestly, not even a day off is peaceful, daring to brawl right in the street like this. They all looked bewildered as the girl pointed a sword and shouted, I'll throw all of you in jail. Brace yourselves. Her shout made Jin drop the guy. He turned to look. Seems a little chaos finally produced some good results. Karina, startled, pointed and said, hey, you're that low-tier guy from the other day. The girl's face and eyes plainly showed her contempt. Then Karina lifted her spear and pointed it straight at Jin. You've got some nerve. Just set foot in the capital and already causing trouble. Still full of arrogance, she declared. As expected, the lowborn will always be lowborn. There are limits you should know, what's allowed and what's not, got it. But someone else stepped in. She hesitated as she recounted the details. Sorry to interrupt, but I happened to pass by and saw the whole thing. Those people were actually the ones ambushed by the other, so I think their actions were purely self-defense. The explanation left Karina frozen. After a moment, a familiar voice rang out. Well, he does look rather familiar. Karina glanced at the man, then turned and asked, You lot, are you cadets from Harnisk Academy? After some chatter, she sighed, seeming less bored. Just as I thought. I hope that young lady wasn't involved in this. Jin wondered which young lady. Karina ordered her subordinates as she answered, take them away. This is our internal matter, you don't need to bother. He was surprised by Karina's actions. So even the Holy Knights patrol now. I thought that was the guild's job. She put on a cold exterior and replied, this capital is vast. We're just doing our part to keep public order. But inwardly she thought, honestly, I was just passing by looking for snacks. Suddenly her expression turned serious. She quietly sized up Jin. This guy really packed a punch. Those cadets from earlier weren't pushovers either. Then she turned to leave, offering a farewell. All right then, try not to cause more trouble in this city. Suddenly Jin shouted for her to come back. Wait, if it's not too much trouble, I want you to lead me somewhere. Karina looked back, puzzled. You want me to take you somewhere? Night had fallen at Argus's manor. Jin sat in a chair and with exaggerated sincerity said, higher up. Argus was taken aback. Didn't you tell me when we met to come if I needed help? He asked, seems like you've brought more people than last time. Jin replied casually, something unexpected came up. He slowly recounted everything. They'd run into the bandits Argus had warned about. Seeing them held captive, he had intervened to free them. Argus asked worriedly, what about the bandits? Jin explained, I taught them a lesson. Then I left the rest for the guild to handle. Argus could only nod. I understand. But he wondered, could one man really have defeated them all? Thinking that, he asked, why did you decide to help those girls? Jin calmly replied, they have no relatives. They're what you folks call the lowborn. He looked at the two youngsters beside him with a gentle gaze. I figured I should at least try to find them some work. Argus voiced his doubt. I didn't think you'd take it upon yourself to care for them. Jin answered calmly, it's just my working principle. He spoke earnestly. Whatever the reason, I saved their lives, and I won't do things half-heartedly. I'll take responsibility for this to the end. Argus sounded surprised by that. Meanwhile, Porwaru and the boy were deeply grateful. After a moment's thought, Argus nodded in agreement. Very well, they can stay and work here at the manor. She asked again, overjoyed just to be sure. Really? However, Argus said, with his own intent, I have one condition. His voice came slowly. I want you to take on the role of an instructor. Jin was stunned. An instructor. A short while later, Porwaru and the boy had changed into work clothes. Jin nodded approvingly at their appearance. You're looking the part, aren't you? She bowed gratefully to Argus. Lord Argus, we are deeply grateful to you. Seeing this, he replied gently, no need to thank me. Then Argus turned to his servants and instructed, I trust you too. In training them, absolutely no discrimination just because they are lowborn. The two immediately complied. We obey. Before leaving, Porwaru waved to Jin. Thank you very much, sir. On the way, Jin asked first, so what now? This instructor offer, surely you have an ulterior motive, right? Argus led the way and answered calmly, sharp of you to notice. That'll be useful for the job. His expression grew serious. Though I don't know your background fully, I want to trust that you're the right person for this. What Argus actually wanted was, I want you to undertake a covert investigation inside Harnisk Academy. Hearing that, Jin's face turned grave. What exactly is going on here? Argus slowly revealed a shocking secret. The kingdom is currently the target of many factions vying for power. Jin, puzzled, asked back, surely there's still a king ruling here. Argus's face grew sorrowful. The king is gravely ill and has little time left. Because of that, the struggle for succession has quietly begun in the shadows. He added, there are those with no claim to the throne who are scheming to seize the kingdom. Argus clenched his fist in anger. They are using illegal invaders and dragging innocent people into their vile plots. Putting the pieces together, Jin realized, I see, so it's not just that local lord we need to watch out for. Argus's voice rang clearly. Such dangerous people are hiding and operating covertly right in this capital. We must find their stronghold as soon as possible. Jin continued, and the most suspicious place is Harnisk Academy, right? Argus did not deny it. Exactly. By now Argus was standing before a door and knocked. I'm coming in. He opened the door and introduced to Jin. She will be the one to guide you into the academy. Inside the room someone had been seated for some time. Let me introduce her. My sister studies at Harnisk, Milia Ut. Argus raised his hand in introduction. Suddenly Milia stood up and interrupted. Brother. She stared at them arrogantly. Are you seriously saying you'll entrust the secret mission you mentioned yesterday to this lowborn? Argus hurriedly scolded. Milia, that's rude. But Milia shot back sharply. What's rude about it? Isn't the existence of such lowborn people itself an insult? She lightly fanned herself. That peasant-looking woman aside, this matter cannot be entrusted to an ordinary lowborn. Jin watched it all with amusement. Truly a prejudiced young lady, poor Argus, his lot in life. Argus apologized sincerely. Please don't mind her words. Karina sidled up and whispered to him, Though the lady is talented, she has a deep dislike for those of the lowborn. Hearing that, Jin commented, I get it, she's not all that different from her. Just then Milia waved her fan and interjected, do you understand, brother? She listed her objections. This isn't merely an infiltration mission. He'd also have to fulfill all the duties of an instructor. Finally, Milia concluded, I don't believe a lowborn could possibly be capable of teaching others. Or does he actually hold the proper credentials? At that moment a voice rang out, exposing the truth. Jin can't even read. That fact made Jin awkward. Don't say that out loud. Read, Milia was disappointed in his competence. Then he's completely unqualified to even be considered. Suddenly a sincere voice spoke up. There are many things only Jin can teach. He truly is extraordinary, more than any of us. Milia fell silent and carefully assessed Jin once more. A moment later she swept past him arrogantly. Well, it seems he has enough strength to suppress and keep those students in line, huh? Before departing, her cold gaze warned, but being a teacher requires more than brute strength. Then Milia closed the door and walked out. Karina rubbed her head tiredly and spoke first. About those cadets on the road, I suspected that young lady was behind them. Argus looked more helpless than ever. I'm terribly sorry. I will discipline the girl properly. Jin comforted him. I don't mind. He quickly shifted back to the main topic. Also, as an instructor, exactly what subject do you intend me to teach? Argus replied promptly, spirit arts. He calmly noted, based on my assessment, you're extremely proficient in spirit arts. Am I right? Jin was silent for a moment, then asked, which part of spirit arts should I teach? Argus answered immediately, just teach the basics. He listed, fire starting, lightning discharge, ice formation, healing. If you can perform at least 2 of these 4 basic techniques, that will suffice. Jin deadpanned, that's it, just that simple. His remark left Argus puzzled, who asked, what do you mean by just that? Argus couldn't believe it and pressed on. Don't tell me you can also use those rare special spirit arts only a few can master. Jin suddenly pondered an unfamiliar term, and after thinking he realized, wait, so that bandit fellow is considered the elite class in this age. The corner of Jin's mouth curved up. How interesting. Finally, he made a decision. All right, I suppose I'll shake up the common assumptions of this age a bit. In the blink of an eye, a new term was about to begin. A week passed at Harnisk Academy. The atmosphere during entrance exam day was extremely lively. Candidates arriving to take the exam were very excited. Among them, Hakama also came to take the exam. She looked very focused for this test. Elsewhere, Rudman warmly welcomed Argus and Jin into the school. Oh my, it's an honor that you personally escort us here. He was polite upon seeing Argus among the Holy Knights. I suppose Unit 7 must be very busy. Please don't worry about that. It's simply our turn to perform the duty. Jin standing behind heard those words and grew suspicious. Our turn, huh? Argus didn't hide anything and patiently explained to him. Once a year, the Holy Knights take turns assigning one member to serve as a special instructor for this academy. This year, that duty has been entrusted to Unit 7. I understand. Argus's words left Jin more thoughtful. Am I really suited for this job? His musing was caught by Rudman's observing gaze. Rudman led the 2 of them to a door and invited, this way. He opened the door and announced, the headmistress and the board are waiting for you inside. Inside the room, the headmistress regarded them with a sly look. Argus stepped in and bowed respectfully. Long time no see, headmistress. The headmistress smiled faintly and praised. Since you graduated as the top student, you've quickly become a very prominent knight in a short time. While the 2 conversed, Jin kept watching everything in the room. Thank you for agreeing to assist us. It is my duty. The headmistress leaned back in her chair and said calmly, I've also heard some rumor. Her gaze carried an implication. Besides handling spirit arts issues, you're also entangled in disputes among internal factions. Her tone remained calm but carried a threat. I understand you can't commit many personnel, since everyone is very busy. The headmistress fixed her sharp eyes forward. However, that doesn't give you the right to be disrespectful in this academy. She was clearly referring to Jin. Of course she was. Don't tell me you intend to let this fellow be an instructor here. The 3 of them showed Jin no pleasant expression. Jin just sighed helplessly at their attitude. Argus bowed again and stood up for Jin. Rest assured, he far exceeds everyone in my Unit 7. At least in terms of practical combat skills, even he has acknowledged Jin's talent. The headmistress pondered with a grim face for a moment, then decided, if you assert that, I'll accept it for now. Just as the headmistress struggled with the matter, Jida beside her spoke up. But how are we to resolve this? Headmistress, I firmly oppose it. He pointed a finger at Jin and sneered. In this sacred, historic academy, there's never been a precedent allowing the lowborn race to teach. This position is not meant for an inferior class. Are you trying to insult our academy? Those words stirred the headmistress a little. She turned and asked, "You've spoken, Mr. Jita. Mr. Rudman, what is your view?" Rudman pretended to ponder and then gave his opinion. "I agree with him. Most of our students come from noble families. If a lowborn person is allowed to teach, it will surely face fierce opposition from students and even the faculty." The headmistress heard this and, pleased, feigned a helpless sigh. "You see, my thinking is basically the same as theirs. But let him present himself and see." Hearing that, Jin slowly stepped forward. He respectfully bowed to the headmistress and introduced himself. "Sorry for the late introduction. I'm from Kodama village. My name is Jin Shidu." Jin's demeanor made the headmistress privately take note. Despite being severely insulted, he maintained an oddly calm composure. Jin shot back with a sharp, confident look. "I fully understand your concerns. However, I'd like to ask a small question. Am I unworthy to be an instructor simply because I'm lowborn, or is it because I lack real ability?" The headmistress adopted a magnanimous tone and replied with flowery words. "Obviously the latter. As long as one has the ability, everything else is secondary." She then issued a challenge to Jin. "So can you prove your abilities?" Argus seized the moment and suggested, "If that's the case, why don't we run a quick test?" Everyone moved out to the training grounds. At Harnisk Academy's Spirit Arts Practice Arena, Jita stood opposite Jin and began to explain. "Since today is the entrance exam, there are hardly any students around. At least that avoids any public embarrassment." Jin remained silent, simply observing without bothering to reply. The headmistress stood between them and announced the rules. "The rules are simple. You two will duel using only spirit arts. You're here to apply for the spirit arts instructor position, so seeing your power firsthand is the best way to judge, right?" The students watching grew curious and began to whisper, "What's going on? I heard a friendly match is about to happen." "It seems this is the first time I've seen Lord Jita fight." Milia couldn't help but glance over at the chatter. Hearing all that prattle, Jin silently cursed in his mind. What a waste of time. The headmistress and the onlookers focused their attention. "All right then, let's see what a member of the lowborn race can actually do." Even Argus felt nervous watching Jin fight. This is the first time I've seen him in action. He knew well that those of the lower races often have weak physiques. Even if they possess divine power, they can usually only unleash a small portion. For that reason, Argus could only pray for Jin in silence. "I just hope my decision wasn't a mistake. Are you ready?" Jita smiled with sly malice. He didn't hesitate and launched a fireball at Jin. "I'll strike first." But Jita's attack was easily dodged by Jin. The students outside watched in amazement. Jita glanced at that group of students and grew even more self-satisfied. He continued to gather power, and bolts of lightning shot straight forward. No matter how strong the technique, Jin easily leapt and dodged every strike. Jita sneered inwardly. "All you do is run, truly lowborn trap." He remained cocky. "Maybe I didn't become a holy knight, but I graduated top of this academy. You don't stand a chance against me." Jita showed no mercy and continued to unleash his ultimate move. No matter how deadly Jita's attacks were, Jin still easily avoided them all. Jin thought to himself, "Honestly, I shouldn't use this power against a mere human." But because of Jita's continual taunting, he was forced to act. "I'll show you a small portion of it then." A massive orb of power formed directly above Jita. The energy sphere crushed him into the ground. The headmistress and Rudman opened their eyes wide in astonishment at what had happened. Even Argus couldn't hide his surprise. Milia couldn't help but be astonished at Jin's technique. Jita was crushed into the ground, unable to get up. What is this? What just happened?" Jin stepped closer and taunted. "I simply adjusted the gravity around him a bit. Haven't you ever heard of that kind of spirit art?" He gave a wry smile. "Looks like I'll have plenty to teach at this academy." Jin clenched his gloves and declared to everyone present, "Not just lessons for the students, but lessons for all of you as well." Jita remained pinned under Jin's weight, unable to move. He forced himself up and ground his teeth as he glared at Jin. Jin calmly snapped his fingers. At his snap, the orb pressing on Jita vanished, releasing him. Unaware of his own limits, Jita continued to berate him. "Jin, what the hell did you pull? That's clearly spirit art, don't you know that?" Trembling with rage, Jita jabbed a finger at Jin and shouted, "I've never heard of such a bizarre spirit art. You must have used some cheap trick." At his behavior, the headmistress and Rudman could only look on helplessly. This truly made the two of them acknowledge Jin's power with respect. It seemed everything was over. The students outside who'd witnessed the match buzzed with conversation. Milia had already guessed the move Jin used. No doubt about it, it was a very high-level spirit art. She still couldn't believe. How could that be, unlike us, those who evolved under spirit guardianship, that lowborn race couldn't possibly possess any divine power? Milia glanced at Jin with curious, skeptical eyes. So what is he really? Who is that man? A week later, a solemn voice rang out across the camp. The headmistress stood on the podium and told all the students, "This academy doesn't just teach books. Its core goal is to train true warriors, those capable of destroying the Hollow One. Anyone who can't keep up with the curriculum will be expelled from the academy without mercy." She also made an enticing offer. However, for those who complete the program, joining the ranks of the Holy Knights will no longer be a distant dream. All results depend on one's own ability. Milia's group stood up high looking down and remarked, "We've got quite a lot of new students this year, huh?" Yes, it seems commoners make up a large number. While Milia was lost in thought, an orange-haired student came up to talk to her. "Milia, it's rare to see you at the entrance ceremony. I thought you were the type who never cared about others." The two stood and chatted. The orange-haired boy asked, "What about you? If a prestigious noble is among the freshmen, would you try to win their favor to keep your standing?" Suddenly, the orange-haired boy glanced down in alarm. "What's going on down there?" His attention fell on Jin sitting in the faculty row. "Why is a lowborn sitting in the professor's seats?" "Because he's a teacher." Milia, reading the orange-haired boy's expression, asked, "From your perspective, what do you think of that man?" The orange-haired youth stammered awkwardly. "Still, he's just a guy from a lower race, after all." Milia kept her aristocratic air and judged, "Maybe he's not entirely wrong." Jin sat below, watching everything around. He glanced at the students with a displeased look. "This school is truly vast. The investigation will definitely take a lot of time." "Those looks really bother me," Jin thought. "First priority is to erase this lowborn label." Even the nearby professors seemed uneasy sitting next to him. "If this keeps up, I'll draw more attention than necessary. Never mind the investigation. I'm already the most suspicious person in the academy. First, I need to earn their recognition." Everything else at the academy continued peacefully. Jita stood on the podium and began to introduce today's subject. "We will begin classes on spirit arts starting today. To ensure you aren't outpaced by the new recruits, always stay vigilant." He beamed with pleasure. "Yes, that is exactly what I intend to convey." Seeing only a handful in class, Jita angrily scolded, "What's going on? Why is today's attendance so sparse? Huh, are all of you lacking enthusiasm?" Milia sighed helplessly from above. She knew the reason well. Jita smugly thought, who would want to attend a lecture taught by a lowborn? He was the cause of today's absenteeism. I deliberately spread word everywhere that a lowborn would be teaching today. Feigning a warm smile, Jita invited Jin up. How troublesome. "All right, let's begin. Mr. Jin, please introduce yourself." Jin didn't hesitate to stand before them and introduce himself. "I'll begin the introduction. My name is Jin Shidu. I've been assigned here to teach you the fundamentals of spirit arts in the coming period. Nice to meet you all." A red-haired student crossed his arms and challenged, "Do you really think you're qualified to do this?" Noticing his attitude, Jin replied nonchalantly, "That's for you to judge." Rather than get angry, he even offered a suggestion. "If you find my lessons worthless, you're free to skip them. But there is one mandatory rule you must remember." Jin clenched his hands and warned in a solemn tone, "Never, under any circumstance, use this power to harm others." He began the lecture. "The nature of spirit arts is the ability to neutralize the super-regenerative powers of the taint. However, this suppressive effect doesn't work on human bodies. You will only inflict ordinary physical wounds on them. Do you know why?" Jin clenched his hands and declared, "Because this power was created solely for the purpose of destroying the tainted. Therefore, I ask that you never abuse this power." A boy in class laughed and taunted, "Are you stupid? Power is just power." A gray-haired student deliberately provoked, sneering, "I was curious what a lowborn could teach, and you tell us not to use spirit arts." His words made the class laugh and whisper mockingly. Jin wasn't particularly surprised by their attitude. He only sighed helplessly and said, "If you think I lack ability, then prove it." This time Jin provoked, "Use your strongest technique to attack me." He even made a wager, "If you can scratch me even a little, I promise to disappear from this place and never return." The gray-haired student laughed loudly, triumphant. "Don't come crying and begging when you regret it. Lowborn, don't wait until it's too late to back down." Jita nearby put his hands to his head and scolded, "Hey you idiot, stop. You're about to hit me too, are you?" The gray-haired boy unleashed his power, sending a massive surge of energy straight at Jin, creating a powerful shockwave. He smugly waited for the outcome. Suddenly, a small dagger shot out from the smoke, flying straight forward, impaling the wall behind him and shattering a large section. Jin slowly emerged from the smoke and calmly said, "If I'd wanted to, you would have died right after that attack." He looked at the gray-haired student and offered a lesson. Judging others by appearance alone is a deadly mistake. The orange-haired student, still stunned by the scene, wondered, What was that just now? Was that spirit art? All the students now showed caution toward Jin's power. He spoke in a clear, solemn voice. You believed I was weak because I'm lowborn, right? But the truth is I'm far stronger than you. Jin stared at him. So what do you think you should call me? Let me give you the answer. The attack served as a lesson to assert Jin's authority. He declared, from now on, you will call me Professor. Jin crooked a smile and emphasized, does anyone here truly understand the conditions required to activate spirit art? He looked at everyone below, then fixed his gaze on the student who had attacked him. You who just attacked me, answer my question. The boy stood up, flustered and anxious. It's simply based on one's imagination, isn't it? He immediately summoned magic, thinking aloud as he explained. Mages concentrate and raise their spiritual power, then transmit the image in their mind to the spirits to materialize them. Isn't that basic knowledge? Hearing that, Jin's lips twitched. Imagination is indeed important, but it's not the prerequisite for activation. No sooner had he finished than he summoned an energy in his palm. Spirits only truly unleash power after they receive a specific frequency wavelength. The student went pale. A frequency wavelength, Jin continued. Basically, there are 8 main wavelength types. He carefully demonstrated and explained in turn. A flame burst in his right hand, incinerate. The other hand summoned a bolt, discharge. Next came a warm energy, heal. And finally a biting cold gust, freeze. These are powers you should already have mastered. The students' faces froze. Jin continued. Besides those, there's the ability to manipulate gravity. On the other hand, a radiant magic appeared. Light manipulation, air pressure control, and the ability I used earlier, spatial protection. Witnessing that, Jita thought in astonishment, can you really master all 8 spirit arts? Jin looked at the spirit arts in his hands with pride. Just like the way you launched that electric lance at me earlier. Visualization is an indispensable element. He hesitated for a moment, then gave a slight smile. Crossing his arms with a casual air, shall we start the official lecture now? Time passed until the bell. Jin strode down the corridor alone, walking and mulling things over. All right, it's come to this. I need to carry out an investigation in this huge academy. Just then he heard students whispering outside. That professor, Jin watched their reactions. Wherever he went there were clusters of students. I still haven't found any truly suspicious spots. Perhaps I should search forbidden areas where students aren't allowed to go. He noticed Milia standing nearby. His eyes narrowed as he glanced at her. A sixth sense seemed to prick Milia as well, and she turned to look at him. Jin ignored her and passed calmly, but Milia quickly called out, Hey, you over there, where exactly are you from? He turned back and replied sarcastically, So you're not simply a lowborn after all. Milia snapped angrily. You're certainly no ordinary person, I'll admit that. Then Milia's face fell with disappointment. A lowborn shouldn't be able to use all types of spirit arts. Jin blinked. I literally explained this in class. Anyone can do it if they can separate the wavelength types. Milia sighed. Don't talk about it so casually. She glanced as other students whispered. All kinds of spirit arts in one hand. Really, Milia asserted firmly. If it were that easy, you wouldn't be attracting this much attention. Then she turned. Let's find somewhere else to talk. In no time, the two of them reached a deserted spot with no one around. Milia suddenly turned and asked, So, are you willing to answer my question now? Jin remained calm, simple. For the past 100 million years, I was an ancient person sleeping soundly in Kodama village. Milia, walking, commented, You're really good at jokes. She stopped and spoke seriously. Then let me ask again. What did you do 100 million years ago? Jin was a bit puzzled by the strange question. A lot happened. I was an agent back then. Milia frowned suspiciously. An agent, he smiled and explained. A person who served the nation. I fought countless villains. Jin recalled those times, vague images surfacing in his mind. Even though it happened 100 million years ago, he remembered it as clearly as if it were yesterday. Now remembering, Jin smiled nostalgically. How sentimental, isn't it? Milia still asked doubtfully. I wonder why someone like you ended up sleeping for 100 million years, he answered plainly, because I failed. Jin slowly recounted. I thought I could handle everything myself, if only I had tried harder. He emphasized, and the price was that I lost everything in utter helplessness. I also accepted this lecture position, hoping you all would help me if I ran into trouble. Milia wondered silently how much of his story was true. After finishing, Jin asked blankly, By the way, which way are we heading? Milia walked ahead nonchalantly. Anyway, I suppose I should fulfill my duty as a guide. After a while, Milia led him to a shabby, dust, and cobweb-filled room. We're here. Jin stepped in, puzzled. Where is this place? Milia answered bluntly. This is the room where instructors store materials for class. Jin stroked his chin, musing. So this is just a storage room, huh? He began to look around. Suddenly, he noticed a little owl statue on a bookshelf. When his eyes landed on the statue, Jin's expression tightened as if he sensed something odd. He immediately turned to Milia and asked, "Why did you bring me here?" She pulled out a stack of papers. "It means I'm investigating too. There's a very unusual void right next to this room. It's large enough to form another chamber." Milia said, "Suspicious, right? If there's something hidden, it's definitely here." Jin was silent for a moment, then replied, "I understand." The moment he touched the owl statue, a secret passageway revealed itself. Seeing the dark passage, Jin said, "Looks like your guess was completely correct." Milia asked, pointing at the passage, "How did you notice it?" He replied casually, "Although this area is covered in thick dust. Only this spot is strangely clean. The rest was just intuition built from my experience." He then decisively stepped inside. "I'll go in and check. You should wait out here." Milia panicked. "Wait, I want to come too." Jin halted and warned plainly, "If there's something inside, it could be a corruption. This could be dangerous. You understand?" Milia frowned in determination, pounding her chest confidently. "Don't underestimate. Besides, my grades are among the top this year. I have skills that aren't any worse than my brother." Hearing that, Jin gave a small smile and nodded. "Fine, I'll trust your ability." So Jin led the way, and Milia followed carefully behind. As they walked, Jin sensed, this path leads quite deep underground. Milia thought silently, light control technique really is handy. After a while, Jin suddenly said, "If this were a fantasy story, I'd feel like a monster's about to pop out." Milia hesitated a bit, then asked, "By the way, going back to earlier, if you fought villains for so long, do you have any leads on the suspect?" Jin forced a smile. "You're asking too many questions for one workday." Later he sighed and pondered, "I suppose there's a possibility Lord Rudman is involved in this." Milia was stunned. "How do you know?" Jin reasoned. "He acts very composed in conversation. But when he's not speaking to anyone, his mind seems elsewhere. That's a trait often seen in those forced to act against their original purpose." He recalled and added, "His vigilance is unusually strong, but I pretended not to notice." Milia frowned, thinking back. "Before this, I thought Professor Jita was the suspicious one." Jin smiled and replied, "That would be impossible for a lecturer like—" All his emotions show too clearly on his face, so he must be a good-hearted man with no guile. Then he looked down the path ahead. "All right, let's move on." Suddenly they encountered a scene of swirling dust and white mist before them. Milia looked up and observed, "It's hard to believe there's such a vast space under the academy basement." While walking normally, Jin suddenly stopped. Milia, a bit frightened, "What's wrong?" He exclaimed in amazement, "I didn't expect it to be in a place like this." Jin looked at the sturdy gate before him, thinking to himself, "This is the gate leading to the lab Kagura left everywhere." Jin raised his eyes to the towering door blocking his path, silently marveling. This is the laboratory Kagura left behind. He studied the pale blue light covering the door. Thoughts churned in his mind. This door is protected by nanoparticles. It must be. At the same time, Milia stood stunned before the gigantic door, unable to hide her doubt. A gate this huge is under the academy. She stepped closer to Jin and lowered her voice to ask, "Do you think we can go inside?" He touched the door lightly and replied calmly, "Basically, you need an access key." Milia blinked in confusion. An access key. Jin kept scanning the area, his tone steady. "Think of it as a conductor to open this door." Saying that, he propped his hand on his chin and fell into thought. Memories surged back. The light from the small key on Hakuma's neck flashed in his recollection. He analyzed carefully. In Kodama village, Hakuma inherited that key. It's very possible someone here inherited a similar one. Jin frowned slightly. Before the thought even finished, a faint light immediately spilled from his hand. Jin placed his hand on the reinforced steel door. Immediately, a system voice echoed in the silent space, confirming highest-level access right. The gigantic door slowly swung open. A blast of icy air rushed out. Jin stood calmly until the door was fully open, then exhaled softly. The one planning to sow chaos in this nation is the one holding the access key. He led Milia inside. Before them was a massive monster imprisoned in an iron cage. Milia stepped back several paces in terror at the sight, her voice trembling. "This horror is right under the academy." She turned to Jin, eyes full of doubt. "But how did you open the door? Didn't you say you needed an access key?" Jin continued forward casually and answered calmly, "Ancient people are very special." Milia watched him, myriad questions rising in her mind. Could he really be a person from 100 million years ago? Jin seemed unconcerned with Milia's thoughts. He strolled along, slowly observing each monster locked in iron cages. Suddenly Jin stopped and sighed softly. How strange. He furrowed his brow, full of doubt. Why were they kept docilely imprisoned like this? Jin glanced at the other monsters and pondered silently. Even the other corrupted beasts showed no sign of wanting to attack. He suddenly remembered the beast he'd encountered before. The corrupted monster the bandits kept in a cage was equally silent. Jin fell into thought. Most important, he stared quietly at the giant monster before him, questions swirling. How did they manage to bring a corrupted beast of this size all the way in here? At the same time, Milia gently fanned herself and suddenly spoke. It seems my brother's suspicion that the Academy hides something is totally correct. She frowned and lowered her voice to think. If we ambush here, the mastermind behind this will surely reveal themselves. Just then, Jin interrupted unexpectedly. No. He looked at Milia and explained calmly. Before doing that, we need to lock down the Academy and eliminate all these corrupted ones. Hearing that, Milia immediately panicked and shouted, You want me to just let that criminal escape? Jin quickly replied, tone faintly exasperated. I understand how you feel, but what if these corrupted monsters suddenly go out of control? His voice dropped, each word meant to frighten Milia directly. The ones in danger would be the students at the school, the ones right above us right now. Jin conjured an image of students laughing and chatting in the courtyard, calmly reminding her. Your brother would surely value everyone's safety more than prioritizing catching the culprit. Hearing that, Milia gradually calmed down and said softly, You have a point. Jin nodded slightly and continued. Besides, I have a bad feeling. His voice turned low. My instincts are usually very accurate at times like this. I want to examine this laboratory more closely. Jin looked at Milia, his tone softening as if pleading. Contact Argus and lock down the Academy for me. Can I trust you with this? Milia immediately nodded in agreement. As soon as he got her answer, he turned on his heel and walked away, sighing softly. All right. Jin quietly glanced up at the ornate clock hanging on the wall, then decisively stepped deeper into the laboratory, walking and pondering silently. In this situation, he hoped to find some clue. At that moment, the ticking of time from the clock echoed coldly through the space. Back at the school, Jita strode along amid the murmurs and gossip of those around. He clenched his fists, glaring angrily at the students pointing at him. Jita ground his teeth, anger flaring up inside. It's because of those lowborn creatures that my honor has been utterly ruined. He fumed. He can't possibly control 8 types of spirit magic, can he? He must be using some trick. Jita stamped his foot in irritation, shouting inwardly, I swear I will personally unmask him. Just then, a calm voice sounded from behind him, Master Jita. The stern principal looked at him and admonished in a low voice, The students are starting to get scared, so could you stop those odd actions? Jita flinched. Principal. The principal sighed, her tone tinged with irony. Oh dear, I'm not here to judge your personal hobbies. He was startled to hear that. She treats it like a pastime. Suddenly, she raised her voice. By the way, have you seen Mr. Rudman? Jita hesitated and asked. You mean Mr. Rudman? He rubbed his chin thoughtfully and answered. Now that you mention it, I haven't seen him since the entrance ceremony earlier today. Before he finished, the principal sighed wearily. How troublesome. She clutched her head, voice full of regret. I wanted to ask his opinion about classes for the new students. Suddenly, the principal paused, her eyes sharp as she glanced upward. What is that? She looked at the dark clouds in the sky, voice hesitant. What could that thing be? Elsewhere, Milia was hurriedly running up from the deep, underground vault. She burst through the heavy hatch and stepped out into the corridor above. Stopping abruptly, Milia clutched her chest and panted, trying to catch her breath. She told herself she must quickly report this to her brother. But at that moment, a cold voice cut in. What are you going to report? The instant she heard that voice, Milia's face went pale and she trembled, unable to speak. Rudman stood in the middle of the room as if he had been waiting for Milia a long time, lowering his voice threateningly. Miss Milia, She stared at the sly grin on his face and screamed in terror. Meanwhile, another heavy steel door opened on Jin's side, spilling a fierce red light out. Jin muttered inwardly, what the hell is this? He stood frozen, staring into the room as the red glow washed over his face. Before Jin floated a blazing red sphere of energy, pulsing non-stop like the heart of some living creature. Jin studied the control panel intently, suspicion growing. Could Kagura have made these things? He glanced around, and his eyes immediately landed on a mysterious box sitting neatly on the table. Jin opened the box. Inside was a cluster of blocks and a strange liquid. He thought to himself, a nanoblood injection transmission system Kagura left behind. Jin activated the cube device, full of hope. Maybe he left a hint to explain all this mess. The moment the device powered on, a fragmented voice sounded, and Kagura's image and familiar voice appeared. Can you hear me, Jin? Looks like you finally made it. Kagura spoke calmly. I figured you manage. This place is the closest to the lab where you woke up. He suddenly leaned forward, voice deepening. Yes, in this very lab we once built a rather astonishing device. Jin looked back at the strange liquid as Kagura's voice said, Part of that device's function was sealed inside nanoparticles. He pushed up his glasses and boasted loudly, I really am a genius. So what do you think this device is? Kagura exclaimed excitedly. It's a tool for instantaneous teleportation. Jin was instantly stunned and stammered. Instant teleportation. At that moment, the image of the giant monster flashed through his mind. Jin stared at the strange red pulsing object in the center of the room, panic rising. Unbelievable. The giant beast stood motionless in its iron cage, with many smaller creatures locked around it. The clock hands kept moving, ticking away. The large clock displayed the passage of time in an endless cycle. The grotesque crimson time machine across the room gave off a chilling, fearful vibe. Jin frowned worriedly, thinking, a machine for spatial teleportation. He pictured its immense power with the Apple example. It can link two separate points in space. This was technology 100 million years ago they couldn't even achieve. If that's true, these strange events tie into what Argus mentioned about corrupted ones suddenly appearing in the capital. Jin wondered if they were brought there by this teleport device. He rubbed his chin in thought, even the corrupted monsters in the Great Hall. Kagura on the screen continued explaining, pointing at the machine he'd built. And this is the spatial teleportation device. Jin looked on in amazement. It looked so different. He looked up, comparing the pale blue machine on the screen with the horrible crimson device before him. So what exactly is this thing? Time kept rushing on. The red machine suddenly flared with intense light. Its power radiated outward, making Jin wary. The giant beast in the cage was also bathed in the light. It suddenly awoke, its power surging. Immediately, a beam of light teleported the beast elsewhere. At the capital, Milia came running in a panic. Lord Argus, there's an emergency in the capital. Argus looked up worriedly and replied, I'm already aware of the situation. He frowned. If that's the case, this is truly the worst-case scenario. Monsters were falling from the sky in terrifying numbers. In another corner, Rudman pretended not to understand and asked, what's going on? Why does your face look so serious? But his eyes were utterly dark. Milia stepped back, ready to fight. Move away now. You're involved in this, aren't you? Rudman's voice remained calm. Oh, so you've already figured that out. Seems you've been snooping around quiet. He sneered, but you're one step too late. Milia frowned. What do you mean? Rudman dropped the act. Today is when the plan is executed. That's what I'm saying. He sighed reproachfully. Originally, it was supposed to be a bit later, but someone kept nosing around, so I sped things up. Rudman's eyes lit up at that name. He mentioned Jin. That man will definitely become a major threat to my plan. I sensed it by instinct. That guy is just as troublesome as your brother. Rudman pointed to the passage behind Milia. In fact, he's already found that secret passage. Right now he's down there. You know that. I want to root out those troubling seeds immediately. Milia smiled faintly and activated her magic. Do you really think you can defeat me? Rudman sneered, frowning. Of course I can, because I possess an unstoppable power. He spoke loudly, unaware that behind Rudman, Hakama had quietly slipped in, holding a large jar ready to strike him from behind. Milia saw it too, but stayed silent, holding her breath and waiting. While Rudman kept boasting, I'll show you its power. A loud crashing sound rang out as the magic surged. Milia curled a smile at the corner of her mouth. Hakama exhaled in relief. The girl smiled. I won. Milia asked, puzzled. Why are you here? Hakama replied. I was looking for Lord Jin. The girl composed herself. Everything outside is becoming extremely chaotic. We really need Lord Jin's help. Hakama turned to look back. Kyudo had said she saw Lord Jin go inside here. Milia hesitantly observed. She's a first year. Kyudo nervously bowed. Yes, my name is Kyudo Plaza. The girl anxiously hid behind Hakama. Hakama, is this okay? You just hit a teacher. Hakama replied calmly. It'll be fine. The girl pointed and explained. He hasn't seen our faces yet. We can pin all the blame on this young lady. Milia gritted her teeth angrily thinking, that girl, don't you dare call me young lady. Footsteps outside grew louder. Hakama turned her head. Jin arrived just in time. Hakama shouted, Lord Jin. He looked around puzzled. What just happened? Hakama grabbed his sleeve. Lord Jin, things outside are going very badly. Jin bowed his head and replied solemnly, I know. The corrupted creatures that had been locked in the lab had all vanished. Milia, too, was terrified to realize it. Everyone hurriedly ran outside. Below the city walls was utter chaos. Fires were spreading. People were being attacked by monsters and fleeing in panic. Some of the monsters could even fly, easily striking down humans. Each of their steps made the ground tremble. The light beast was huge and muscular, with long tentacles around its face like an octopus. A roar from the creature echoed through the air. Milia covered her mouth in alarm. Is the capital in danger? Jin gritted his teeth. I made a mistake in my judgment. I should have destroyed that machine from the start. Hakama urgently pointed. Jin, look up there. The giant monster continued to roar fiercely. A large sphere of magical energy gathered in its mouth, aiming straight for the capital. Kyudo feared and guessed. That giant looks like it's heading straight for the royal castle. Milia worried. If this continues, the royal family will be in danger. Jin pulled out a syringe. This is my fault. I'll take care of it. He injected the syringe into his arm. A rush of power flowed through his veins. The result of this power-up was a function that simplified the spatial teleportation process. Jin remembered Kagura's words. Thanks to the energy stored in the nanoparticles, usage is limited to once per day. Range was limited, so it could only be used for short distances, visible to the naked eye. The monster fired its magical light straight at the castle. Jin simultaneously teleported to another spot. He didn't hesitate to step directly in front of the attack. Using a magical shield to block the strike, he could still appear anywhere instantly. A giant serpent roared violently in the city center, sending citizens into desperate, panicked flight. Meanwhile, a soldier sprinted down a long corridor, trying to raise the alarm. A young woman rushed in, shouting for the guild master and warning that a giant corruptor was outside the walls. The guild master calmly replied that he already knew about the situation outside. Then, with a tone of regret, he said, "Unfortunately, there's nothing more we can do." He explained, everyone capable of fighting has already gone out to help evacuate civilians. The holy knights who could still move were charging into fierce battle. The girl asked in surprise what he meant. The guild master revealed the knight's situation. Half of them are out of the capital on missions. The girl was stunned. At that moment, a shadowy creature with rows of yellow eyes appeared, destroying everything in its path. The guild master realized this had been planned. They attacked precisely when the knights were absent. He regretted, if the commander were here, we'd still have a chance. But the massive beam of energy was still hurtling straight toward the kingdom's castle. Suddenly, a soldier pointed out the window, his voice desperate. "You have to see this." The guild master looked out, and the old general's expression changed to utter astonishment. The protagonist formed a colossal energy shield, stopping the creature's devastating attack. From the window, the guild master and his subordinates witnessed the unbelievable sight. The young woman recognized him and smiled with relief. "That man, he's from Kodama village." The giant monster stood at a distance, watching the city, ready to resume its rampage. The hero quickly leapt down from the rooftop to the ground. He landed with a blue energy aura, enveloping his whole body. At that moment, the young man concentrated a terrifying amount of power into his palm. A gigantic beam of blue energy shot straight at the giant monster. The white-haired warrior faced the enemy with a serious, fiercely determined gaze. The attack struck the monster's shoulder directly, making it feel real pain. The protagonist realized its mass was too great to fell with a single blow. Moreover, the teleportation had consumed more energy than he expected, so he decided to draw his energy sword and deal with it raw power style. Weapon in hand, he readied for combat and grinned. Might as well warm up a little. Then the swordsman lunged at full force, unleashing a horrifying slash of energy. The strike hit home. The giant monster roared in pain and fury. The hero immediately sprang high into the air to continue the assault. He knew the monster would regenerate, but the blow had bought him some time. With intense focus, the young man employed a special skill. He decided to apply the basic concept of nanomachines in the fight. He negated his body weight by manipulating gravity. His feet touched the ground as lightly as if he had no weight at all. Then he generated wind by controlling air pressure, moving at incredible speed. Meanwhile, a soldier fell and was about to be attacked by another monster. But a colossal fireball came flying, exploding on the monster's body and saving him. Someone shouted, "We're here to help." The soldier recognized these young people as students of Harnisk Academy. One of them thanked the soldiers for their bravery. Two wolf-eared students prepared to fight as the capital was in peril. They were surrounded by two monsters and knew they had to give it their all. Suddenly, the protagonist stomped the ground hard, creating a shockwave. In an instant, he sliced the two monsters, threatening the students in half. The youngsters were stunned by the sudden arrival and the white-haired man's power. One asked, "Is that guy a lowborn?" The other confirmed. The hero rushed toward the giant, knowing its regeneration would take some time. However, the monster's arm had fully recovered, and it roared fiercely. It fired two beams of energy from its shoulders at the warrior. With supreme agility, the hero dodged by leaping up at the last moment. He realized that aside from the previous attack, this monster wasn't a major threat. The young man moved down the street, cutting down every monster in his path. He decided to finish the giant before it could strike again. The swordsman moved ever faster, saving civilians while slaying monsters. With a determined smile, he gathered his strength to accelerate even more. Then he charged straight for the main target to finish it. He bounded high into the air and brought down a terrifying vertical slash that cracked the ground. The colossal strike landed squarely on the giant's body. The many-eyed monster was stunned, unable to comprehend what had just happened. From afar, the knights watched, dumbstruck by his power. The girls on the rooftop followed the scene in silent amazement. Then the white-haired youth lunged in with terrifying speed, continuously unleashing a flurry of lightning-fast slashes across the giant's body. The strikes of blue energy hit true, inflicting massive damage. From above, the hero surveyed the result, slashes encircling the monster. He landed, facing the enemy as it prepared to counterattack. Holding his glowing sword, he prepared the final blow and declared, "This is the end." With all his strength, he delivered one last devastating slash. The monster was sliced apart by a volley of blue energy beam. A massive explosion of blue energy detonated in the middle of the city, lighting everything up. The blast was so enormous it could be seen clearly from afar, even beyond the kingdom's great wall. Inside the castle, the guild master and the girl heard the blast and looked up in astonishment. "What's happening?" the guild master asked, worry obvious on his face. The protagonist landed in style as the giant dissolved into blue smoke. "So who exactly is that man?" the guild master wondered. 3 days passed, and the city began rebuilding after the giant's attack. On the street, the white-haired young man stood looking out from a building window. Inside the room, he stretched and thought to himself. Despite the chaos, the damage wasn't too severe. He sat on the bed, telling himself, all thanks to the Holy Knight's ability. Many knights couldn't fight because they were guarding against the giant corruptors. Thanks to that, cleanup went quickly, and the knights actively helped the civilians. The academy was sealed off for investigation, and Professor Rudman, suspected as the mastermind, was finally arrested. Other professors and the headmaster suspected of involvement were also taken away. He relaxed on the bed, thinking, the academy's closed, and I've only been gone 1 day. But he realized this incident had presented him with a new challenge. He could handle groups of monsters, but he couldn't take them all out at once to protect everyone. Conclusion: he needs to become even stronger. To do that, he grabbed the blue cube his friend had left in the lab. But at that moment, there was a noise at the door. He asked, "Who's there?" The protagonist went out to open the door, and the white-haired young man faced a blonde woman in an elegant evening gown. She smiled. "I'm here to escort you somewhere." She called him master, which caught him a bit off guard. He felt strange and asked why she had come. The girl replied, "My brother sent me." She explained her brother wanted to thank him and discuss another important matter. Jin asked, "You came all the way here just to fetch me?" She confirmed it. She said it would be rude to send a servant to summon someone as important as you. Representing the Olton family, she came in person, which made him a little embarrassed. He asked, "You won't call me a lowborn anymore." The girl struck a dramatic pose. "I've reconsidered. One shouldn't judge by appearances. One must respect everyone. So I hope to receive your guidance." Just then, the ear-topped girl appeared at the door. Jin called her name. She said, "I'm bored, so I came to visit you." The blonde looked annoyed and disdainfully called the girl Potato Girl. She complained about the girl's forwardness. Jin reminded her, "You just said you reconsider." They arrived at the vast, luxurious Argus family mansion. Servants at the manor came out to greet and welcome the young lady. The butler called the 2 children to lead the way. They happily obliged. The white-haired youth remarked, "They look like they know what they're doing." The boy led him around. He asked if they were injured in the chaos. The boy said no. The girl explained everyone in the manor had protected them because they were very strong and capable. He was glad to know they were well cared for. The maid praised his bravery in the battle. He wondered where she heard the news. The blonde replied, "From Lord Argus." She said spreading word of his deeds was her duty as a disciple, which made him even more embarrassed. She turned to the 2 children. "You should follow Master as an example." The boy lined in and whispered, "Miss Milia was very strict before, but lately she's been gentle." Jin thought to himself, that's quite a change. The group continued, ascending a grand staircase that led to a door. The blue-haired maid knocked and announced, "Master Jin has arrived." When he entered the room, the white-haired young man faced 2 men waiting for him. One was a guild master with wolf ears, his gaze stern and intimidating. The blonde's brother invited him to sit. The 2 children looked on curiously. Everyone sat down. The knight apologized for summoning him abruptly, but Jin said it was fine. The armored man introduced the person beside him. "This is the guild master of the royal capital, Lord Hardin Gunslot." The man stood and shook his hand. pleased to meet you." Sitting down, the guild master said he had witnessed the display of his skill during the incident. "To be honest, if you hadn't stopped that monster, our country would have been plunged into crisis." He bowed his head in thanks on behalf of the entire populace for saving the nation. But Jin replied modestly, "I only took down the big monster. The holy knights handled the rest. They are the ones who deserve thanks." The guild master praised his humility and thought to himself that the man had no trace of greed. Jin asked, "Is that all?" The answer was no. Hardin revealed, because of this incident, the royal family wants to meet. Jin was stunned. The guild master said seriously that first they needed to clarify one thing. With a piercing gaze, he asked bluntly, "Who exactly are you?" He explained that with the guild's resources, nothing could be hidden from him. Hardin apologized for the intrusion, but he couldn't find any information about the young man. Argus also made it clear there would be no excuses this time. The girls watched anxiously. He asked, "Where does this mysterious man come from? What is his purpose in coming to our country?" The white-haired youth calmly faced the two men as they awaited his answer. The room suddenly grew tense, all eyes fixed on the silent warrior. Argus looked at him with a serious, steady gaze, waiting for the truth. The young man scratched his head and smiled sheepishly. "I didn't mean to hide anything. I just thought nobody would believe me, so I kept quiet." The knight smiled. "If you say it, I'll believe you." The white-haired warrior smiled back. "Then you'll believe what I say." With a serious face, he revealed, "I am a person from 100 million years ago." Argus immediately realized, "You're the one they called the taboo in Kodama village," understanding that he was the human who had slept behind the unopenable gate. The guild master admitted, "It's hard to believe at first." But Milia trusted the protagonist and added, "The professor went underground and opened the forbidden gate." She described the ancient door as metal, held shut by two enormous round locks. "My brother and the professors witnessed the professor's power with their own eyes." Argus looked at his sister in astonishment at her revelation. The girl smiled and asked again, leaving her brother speechless. Jin explained, "I slept deep beneath this kingdom for a very long time. The reason I came to the capital is to gather information about this age." The guild master asked what kind of information he was seeking. He answered there were two things. First was about the corruptors, the threat he needed to understand better. He revealed, "These creatures have existed since 100 million years ago." The others were even more shocked. "But they shouldn't be alive in this era." Argus asked why. He explained it was thanks to the spirits. 100 million years ago, the spirits spread across the world and maintained balance. "We saw a colossal energy tower activate, radiating a purifying power. Energy shot into the sky, spreading as brilliant blue beams that covered the planet. From beyond the cosmos, the energy swept the globe like a shower of light. Corruptors can only live in polluted places, saturated with negative energy. But the spirits have the power to cleanse the environment, making it impossible for them to survive." The guild master wondered, why are they still appearing in this era? He admitted he didn't know the details, but took something out of his pocket. Holding the blue cube, he projected a hologram of his friend. The friend said, "The corruptor has evolved." The guild master gasped, "Is this technology from an ancient civilization?" He was curious about how the system worked, but Jin couldn't explain. The white-haired man said, "That's why I came to the royal capital. I want to know how people of this age deal with monsters, and whether there are written records." The guild master asked about the second part. He answered, "Clues about the laboratories. He's searching for labs scattered across the world, but hiding the part about their power." Ultimately, he affirmed, "In any case, I have only one goal." With determined eyes, he declared, "To wipe the corruptors off this world." After he finished explaining, the room fell silent. The guild master said, "This story is quite outlandish." Argus agreed, but smiled, "I believe you, since we all want to fight monsters." The armored man advised him not to tell this story to anyone else. Jin grinned confidently, "I know, people will think I'm crazy." Argus asked the guild master's opinion. He replied, "If you believe him, then I do too. Besides, someone with ill intent wouldn't risk saving an entire castle." The atmosphere in the room immediately relaxed. The three seemed to have reached an agreement. At that moment, the maid and the boy entered, apologizing for the interruption. The girl announced, "The time has come." The blonde Argus asked, "Is it time already?" He smiled and turned to the hero and the servant, "Prepare to go." The white-haired young man was a bit flustered, but agreed. Sometime later, the carriage wheels spun swiftly. The carriage raced along the road, toward the royal family's magnificent castle. Inside the carriage, Jin looked out the window and thought to himself, "I'm about to meet this country's royalty." He was wearing a knight's suit. He wondered if he should change clothes. Argus praised, "The suit suits you." The guild master nodded in agreement. The girls complimented his appearance, but he found the clothes a bit restricted. Hardin explained, the man you're about to meet is the first prince acting on behalf of the king. He said they needed to keep up appearances. Jin thought to himself that the whole thing was a nuisance. As the carriage neared the gate, he only hoped there wouldn't be any more trouble. Inside the castle, ranks of armored knights lined up to welcome them. Many different races made up the royal guard, each one outstanding. The group entered the throne hall. Artistes declared, I have brought the nation's savior. From afar, an authoritative voice from the throne boomed, lift your heads. The three knelt to show their respect. The white-haired man lifted his head, finally looking straight at the person on the throne and studying him closely. On the throne sat the first prince, Tails Kamoja, exuding extreme dignity and confidence. He introduced himself as Jin Shido. The prince merely snorted softly. The prince spoke for his ailing father, expressing the kingdom's gratitude for what you have done. He remarked, I heard Argus say you come from the little village of Kodama. With a sneering tone, he said in surprise, who would have thought someone so strong came from such a tiny place? With a dark smile, the prince said bluntly, I'll speak plainly to you. No beating around the bush, the prince ordered. Become a loyal knight and obey me. Become a holy knight and devote yourself wholly to the nation. The prince's command echoed through the magnificent throne hall, and the air instantly grew stifling and unbearably tense. With eyes blazing red, he repeated the order with supreme arrogance. Jin was completely displeased by the proposal. A flash of anger lit his eyes. The prince noticed the silence and asked, Is there a problem? I haven't heard your answer. Hardin tried to intervene, reminding them that they were the ones who summoned the hero. He advised the prince not to speak in such a coercive manner. But Jin cut in, I don't intend to stay in this country long. The prince said he heard Jin was working at the academy. Jin confirmed it was only temporary. He asked bluntly, so that's a refusal? Jin replied, yes, and I'm sorry about that. In a grave tone, the prince said, then there is no other choice. The guards moved at once. Castle knights drew their swords, ready to strike. The prince ordered, seize the white-haired one. Hardin tried in horror to stop it, but was restrained by the guards. The prince revealed, this warrior is suspected of plotting to overthrow the nation. The hall was stunned. He explained that a corruptor had been hidden behind the academy's ancient gate. Since they said you opened the gate, it was only natural to suspect you. With a wicked smile, the prince suggested, perhaps the saving the country bit was just a performance. The guild master erupted. This accusation is ridiculous and extreme. Jin remained silent as a dozen weapons were leveled at him. The prince said, if you agree to serve me, I'll drop the suspicion. With a sinister grin, he repeated, since you refused, there is no other way. Argus thought to himself, he's only been in the city a short while. I was the one who asked him to investigate the academy, and I warned you beforehand. He looked at the female knight who was smirking and realized they had been deceived. They should have beefed up security. The commander of the 3rd Division and the other knights were fanatically loyal to the first prince. The commander of the 4th Division, the Horned Man, was also aligned with the noble faction. The blonde knight understood clearly. From the start, the intention was to eliminate the hero if he refused. The prince said, letting someone who can fell a giant monster roam free is too dangerous. But with dramatic flair, he declared, I am merciful, so I'll give you one last chance. With his red eyes blazing, he ordered, swear fealty to me at once. Jin stayed silent as knights surrounded him, weapons pointed. With a serious expression, Jin said, I don't understand this situation. The prince, flustered, asked, what do you mean? The tension tightened. Jin explained, a verbal oath means nothing in this situation. He continued, if I just promise and then run off, the oath is worthless. Argus agreed that was true. But Jin kept provoking. With a sharp look, he said, it seems you want to force my word. He had been thinking about the true intent of the one on the throne. Do you just want to satisfy a craving for control, or is there something else? The prince snapped, shut your mouth. An angry knight demanded, who do you think you're talking to? With a mocking smile, Jin told him to listen carefully and grabbed the tip of the spear. With a quick motion, he poured power into the weapon, leaving the soldier stunned. The Horned Knight asked what was happening, not understanding Jin's strength. Before he could grasp what was going on, his massive body was hoisted into the and ultimately was unceremoniously hurled aside by the protagonist. The prince froze in horror, unable to believe what was happening. The blonde knight clutched his head in frustration at the sudden chaos. The commander of the 3rd Division, furious, attempted to use soul magic against Jin, but the spell failed to activate, and she ordered the other guards to seize him. Jin easily blocked a guard's spear, then kicked hard, sending the soldier flying with a bone-shattering crash. Jin remained calm, showing no sign of effort. Next, a powerful gust of force knocked all the remaining knights far away. The blonde prince flew into a rage and ordered an immediate attack on the insolent man. He even commanded Argus to join in beating the traitor. The armored man drew his sword, while the guildmaster watched silent. But the wolf-eared guy hesitated, sweating cold at facing his friend. The prince grinned savagely. I don't care if the target is killed. A swarm of soldiers lunged at Jin, determined to capture him at all costs. At that moment, the silver-haired young man gathered brilliant blue magical energy throughout his body. Then the protagonist's body suddenly vanished, causing every attack aimed at him to fail. But his voice still echoed through the hall. Letting someone with that level of power roam free is dangerous. If I truly wanted to, leveling this city would be absurdly easy. But the reason I don't is because I stand with the people. I'm here to protect the lives of those who live now. However, I do make exceptions. For villains who disdain human life, I won't hold back. So which of the two are you, Clumosia? The prince froze in terror, realizing his life lay in this man's hand. The captain pointed his sword at him in fury, asking if he knew what he was doing. Jin affirmed, saying he was resisting a man trying to force something utterly unreasonable. At that moment, the Horned Knight fell and asked if he wanted to oppose an entire country. The silver-haired young man denied it. Facing his enemies, he said seriously, "You are the ones doing that." The guildmaster listened tensely as Jin explained, "I will respect the true royal family, but I'll only help if this country's rules are fair and the requests are reasonable." The commander listened closely as the protagonist warned, "I'm not so cheap as to silently accept everything." The wounded soldier, enraged, heard him say that if they tried to force him, they shouldn't blame him for resisting. "First, I want to ask you a question." He leaned close to the prince's ear and asked, "Do you think everything will always go your way?" The blonde prince began to sweat as that terrifying voice asked whether he was something more. At that moment, Jin's eyes flashed blue, radiating an incredibly fearsome magical power. However, the great doors of the hall suddenly opened, drawing the captain's and everyone's attention. Elegant footsteps echoed. A mysterious voice commented, "I've heard the whole story." With a gentle smile, a beautiful silver-haired girl entered and asked, "May I join the conversation?" The graceful girl walked into the throne hall, passing guards who stood completely motionless. Seeing the newcomer, the horned beastman exclaimed in astonishment and respectfully called out Princess Charlotte's name. The blonde knight breathed a sigh of relief, glad the girl had arrived in time to help. Argus thought to himself, "Now let the second princess finish this." Charlotte smiled kindly and teased her brother, "You look like you were having fun." The prince glared at his sister with fury, calling her name in a tone of contempt. He was clearly extremely annoyed by the unexpected intervention. He looked toward Argus and realized what had happened. The princess admonished her brother, "You should have invited me to the meeting." With a mocking smile, she reminded him, "You're not even father's official representative yet." The prince ground his teeth in anger at his sister's provocation. He retorted that, regrettably, the other was not a true hero. The prince accused him of being a criminal daring to oppose the royal family. The captain confirmed and said he had wounded the knight's commander. But the princess countered, "Wasn't it because he behaved rudely first?" The horned commander defended himself. "That silver-haired one tried to harm the first prince." The silver-haired princess asked, "Wasn't he only standing behind your brother?" She smiled and turned to Jin, asking, "Isn't that right?" Jin agreed and explained he had only approached to ask a question. The princess looked at her brother. "That's what the young man just said." She taunted, "Are you going to call someone a criminal over something this silly?" The prince trembled with rage, unable to counter his sister's argument. The princess turned back to Jin and used his full name when addressing him. With a graceful bow, she said, "I won't ask you to serve this country as a slave. I ask you to help as a friend." Jin smiled at the offer. The silver-haired princess smiled happily and thanked him for agreeing. She suggested moving the conversation elsewhere, since this wasn't the proper place. With an authoritative gesture, she ordered the knights to escort her new friend. The captain and soldiers obeyed, making way for Jin to pass. The prince looked on with furious rage, utterly powerless. After a while, the carriage departed the castle. The blonde fellow said, "You scared me to death." He asked why the silver-haired man did that. Jin replied, "Just a little." In truth, he sensed a strange aura from the prince and hoped it was only his imagination. but deep down he knew that malice was real and worrisome. He then glanced at the princess and thanked her for rescuing him. The princess smiled. "No need to thank me, you helped us earlier." She apologized for her brother, but Jin said it wasn't necessary. With a smile, the girl reintroduced herself. "I'm Charlotte, the second princess." She asked Jin to continue helping as a friend, and he agreed. Argus wondered about the prince's attitude, but she didn't know the exact reason. She revealed that her brother was very ambitious and full of plans for the future. He intended to start a war to expand the territory as soon as he ascended the throne. Because of that, Jin realized the prince saw him as a major obstacle to his plan. The princess assured him she would no longer let relatives meddle in their lives. She said Hardin had reported everything to their father, who lay ill in his room. She also revealed she had no intention of yielding the throne to her brother. With a serious, determined look, she asked Jin if he truly trusted her. The white-haired young man smiled and replied, "Yes." In the carriage, Argus asked where they were going and why the princess was coming along. She explained it would be rude to summon the nation's savior and not present a reward. She also noted he'd been staying at a modest inn. They arrived. The princess looked excited about the upcoming surprise. With a radiant smile, she said, "We've prepared a special gift for the hero." Seeing the sight before him, Jin gaped in astonishment. The gift Princess Charlotte mentioned turned out to be an enormous, magnificent mansion. She smiled and announced, "From now on, this house officially belongs to you. Use it as you wish." Everyone opened the doors and stepped inside. The grand hall that appeared before them was so splendid that Jin couldn't help exclaiming, "This place is outrageously luxurious." He turned to Princess Charlotte with a skeptical look. "Can I really receive such a huge gift?" His expression made Charlotte chuckle. "Of course. It originally belonged to a count, but it's been vacant for a very long time." Hearing that, Jin asked curiously, "Belonged to a count? What if he returns to claim it?" As soon as he said it, he saw Charlotte's wicked smile and hurriedly stopped. "Never mind, I'm worrying too much." Still, he was a bit uneasy, but suddenly gifting an entire mansion like this is a bit. Before he could finish, the knight Argus cut in. "This is just to show how much we value your ability. Just move in, don't overthink it, because this house is yours now." With that, the group began touring the mansion. After a while, Jin rubbed his chin and nodded, saying, "I get it. But it seems a bit much for one person. Even the bedroom is this cavernous." Beside him, Argus laughed loudly. "Then I'll arrange some servants to manage the place for you. They'll surely be more than happy to serve you." The protagonist didn't agree at once but asked back, "Are you sure?" For this, Argus cheerfully replied, "I owe you a huge favor. But if you don't mind, could I ask one more favor?" Jin, curious, "What favor?" Time passed quickly. The scene shifted to Squad 7's special training yard. There, soldiers were vigorously training together. Even Karina was sparring with a squad member. As the opponent lunged, her eyes immediately focused. She drove her wooden spear forward to block the strike, then flung it so hard the opponent's weapon flew into the air. Finally, she pointed the spear straight at his face. He panicked and begged for mercy. "I admit defeat." At that moment, applause rang out. A cheerful green-haired girl stepped forward to praise. "You've improved fast, Karina." Karina replied dryly, "I still have a long way to go." She reminded herself of the incident the day before. Back then, she'd only handled a few weak lackeys while a memory surfaced of Jin fighting the giant monster alone. That made Karina furious at herself. How could some other creature pull off something so extraordinary? Thinking that, she shouted in frustration, "Damn it, still no next opponent." Just then, a squad member ran over shouting, "Captain, Miss Charlotte has arrived." Not far away, Argus and Princess Charlotte stood by. Seeing everyone halt, Argus said with a smile, "Carry on with your training, everyone." Across the yard, the moment Karina saw Jin's figure, her expression immediately clouded. She clenched her teeth, thinking irritably, "What the hell is he doing here?" Unaware of her thoughts, the third knight respectfully said, "This way, Princess Charlotte." After everyone sat down, Jin turned and asked, "So what do you want me to do?" Argus laughed. "You're already here, surely you can guess." Jin stood up, looked at the knights training, and asked to be sure, "You want me to train them?" The knight nodded, "Exactly. You must have seen the first Prince Tailey's arrogant, contemptuous attitude earlier. Both Prince Tailey's and Princess Charlotte are locked in a fierce struggle for the throne. We can't predict what tricks he might use. The only ones who can loyally protect Princess Charlotte are our Squad 7. No one knows when danger will strike, so I want you to train them to prepare them for that day." Hearing this, Jin silently observed ahead and thought to himself, "Their current skills are pretty decent. They train hard every single day." The sight of soldiers training, until soaked in sweat, brought back old memory. Over 100 million years ago, he was the same. To become an official agent of the state, he had to train like a madman. Back in the present, Knight Argus stepped forward and shouted, "Everyone, gather here at once. Today, to raise the quality of our training, we've invited a national hero as a special instructor. He'll point out the flaws we need to fix. Is that clear?" Everyone shouted in unison, "Yes, sir." Jin narrowed his eyes slightly, taking everything in. He thought to himself, teaching the obedient is easy, but those stubborn ones are a real headache. He stepped forward and announced, "First, I want to test everyone's stamina. All of you run around the perimeter of the training ground." The first to object was Karina. "What? We do that every day. No need for pointless endurance tests." She pointed at Jin with an angry glare. "Did you come here just to make us do this menial stuff?" Seeing this, those nearby quickly tried to restrain her, and Argus also wanted to chide her, but Jin raised a hand to stop him. "I apologize for that earlier. If so, let's change our approach a bit." Saying that, he removed his outer coat, walked to the weapon rack, and said, "Sounds fun. Your weapon is a spear, right?" Karina, not fully understanding, nodded. "Yes." Jin immediately grabbed a spear, pointed it at her, and said, "Try stabbing me once. No time limit. If you touch me even once, the running exercise is cancelled." No one wants to be lectured by someone weaker than them. Hearing Jin's bold declaration, Karina asked with interest, "But do you even know how to use a spear?" "Don't worry," Jin said as he twirled the spear with extreme skill, leaving Karina and everyone else around astonished. He quickly caught the spear as it fell, and confidently declared, "There's no weapon in this world I can't use."